5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ahoy, everyone. My name is Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Nick Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every miniseries, we chart a course through the full filmography of an underdiscussed genre or journeyman filmmaker. In this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently embedded in the films of Joe Wright, and today we explore fact and fiction with his second film, Atonement, and learn if we can trust our own eyes. Nick, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. I'm actually right in the middle of a tracking shot, so I'll get back to you in about 6 to 7 minutes, I would say.
So, Atonement, Joe Wright's follow-up to Pride and Prejudice, starring Keira Knightley. Sorry, some of our old friends. Keira Knightley's up in this movie, right? Brenda Blethyn is in this movie as well. A much smaller role, obviously, than in Pride and Prejudice.
Too bad. Love that lady.
Yes, great. But
Both of them. Yeah.
But also we've got James McAvoy. We've got Saoirse Ronan. Right? I'm saying that right? I think I'm saying that.
It's Saoirse, but I like yours better.
No, Saoirse. Yeah. You're right. It's Saoirse. Vanessa Redgrave.
I actually did look it up once. There was a YouTube video somewhere. I don't remember what it was for. I think it was another podcast. And I was like, I'm not going to fuck this up. So I went on YouTube, and wouldn't you, I'd say the internet comes through like 1 out of 100 times for me. And that was one of those times where it's like, here's how you pronounce this name. And then I went down a rabbit hole of other Irish names that are spelled completely differently than they sound. And now I feel like if I went to Ireland, I could talk to people and pronounce their names correctly, which I'll probably never get to go. But
there's a great, I think it's Colbert, I think, has her on, and they go through, he basically goes like, how do you say this name? And then, she's like saying all these Irish names or whatever. So Vanessa Redgrave, Juno Temple, Benedict Cumberbatch, Alfie Allen.
Cumberbatch.
There is much like Pride and Prejudice, it's one of those things where you're like, man, a lot of these people are about to be real famous really soon, which is pretty crazy. And it's an adaptation of, Ian McEwan, as I say his name, this is again what the Ian McEwan, right? McEwan?
I think so.
McEwan, I think, right? 2001 novel by Ian McEwan.
I did not read this one, by the way, so I can't I can't do the thing that I always do, which is probably better for you.
Damn, also, I should have read it. I have
not read Anna Karenina. We got to do that soon. So
it's true.
Maybe we can both just do some Tolstoy. That is Tolstoy, right? I think so.
I don't know. Is my honest answer? Is my uneducated
I'm
answer?
going to go with yes, but I could be wrong.
I'm not really up on the Russian writers. So
I've always said I am going to read Tolstoy, and I've done 0%.
I have Crime and Punishment on my bookshelf because I was like, I was same thing. I was like, these classics that I sort of, either avoided or begrudgingly read because I was an English major in undergrad. So it was like I had to read a lot of them. So I either begrudgingly read them or avoided them when I could. Now I kind of want to go back and read them on my own and see like what the value is there that maybe I was sort of, too young or, too stubborn to sort of take in.
It's funny how that works, right? Like there is a time in your life where it's like, this is the last thing in the world I want to do. And then you progress beyond that point. Well, like with Pride and Prejudice last week, right? Like I remember that book. I remember appreciating that book, but I definitely didn't like it reading it in high school. And now it's like, I think maybe now that I've seen this really good film adaptation of it, I think I'd like to see it again. And I'd like to give it like the full treatment that I never really did when I was, 16 and just want to get to wrestling practice or whatever.
Yeah. So this story follows a set of characters through basically 3 time periods. And it kind of shows you the development of their lives and how one decision that gets made very early in their lives sort of affects the rest of their lives, right? And I think this film, when it came out, was, one of those movies where when it was, announced, when the trailer started hitting, when the buzz started percolating around it, it was very much, this is an Oscar movie. This is going to be one of those movies that really is up for a lot of Oscars. It could be a front runner at some point. And I feel like, we're going to talk about this. We talked about this right before we started recording. The reception was very much like, yes, this is good, but there's something that's detaching the sort of the viewing people from who watch it from fully embracing it. I felt like the general extent. There are people who absolutely love this movie. There are people who hate it, but for the most part, I feel like it was met with sort of like almost what we talked about. What Pride Prejudice wasn't, right, is this idea of like, oh, it's just one of these things. It's one of these like sort of British, you know, gorgeously mounted sort of, you know, but nothing spectacular sort of productions.
And a prestige pick, certainly Oscar bait. I did notice, which I'm sure I've seen in other things before, but nothing's really jumping to mind. Looking back at the contemporary reviews of this, or the contemporaneous reviews of this, sorry, a lot of the positive ones, there's a lot of 4-star reviews, a lot of 3.5, and a lot of them mentioned like this is a surefire Oscar contender. Like, you know, because it comes out in December and there's some time in between. You don't usually see that, right? Like the critics don't usually weigh in on what's going to be an Oscar contender in the reviews of a movie that's coming out, like in its Oscar release, you know, that period when you put a movie out that's going to be considered. And I thought it was kind of interesting how many of them actually mentioned that. We do have to get into the reviews because there is one, seeing this movie the second, I hadn't seen it since it came out. I remember really, really liking it back in 2007 and thinking it did deserve. 2007 was a very good year for movies, by the way. It was. We did not realize how good we had it back then, but, you know, 2007 is No Country, it's There Will Be Blood, Pan's Labyrinth, one of my favorite movies of all time. I think Del Toro's best movie by a wide margin. What a year for cinema. So it was up against some pretty stiff competition. I remember really, really liking it back then, and seeing it the second time, I still really liked it, but I had some reservations about it. And there was one review that kind of made me think something, kind of pushed my thoughts in a certain direction. And now I think I'm 100% on board for Atonement. We'll get into that a little bit later.
This is also Michael Clayton year. I'm Not There, and The Bourne Ultimatum. We're talking about bigger movies here. Eastern Promises was that year. Was a big year. It was a very big year.
Good movie. Not an Oscar contender, that Eastern Promises. It's kind of it's the anti-Atonement in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Did it get nominated for anything? Did Vigo not get nominated for that movie?
He might have got nominated.
I think he might have got nominated for that movie. But so this movie comes out. I saw it in the theater, like you said. And my memory of the time was I loved the opening section, like the section in the house with Saoirse Ronan and Knightley and McAvoy and sort of the party and the accusation, all of that section. I remember really loving. And then I remember feeling very cold about basically the rest of the movie in a lot of ways. Like I remember at the time being very much like, okay, we get it, buddy, with the tracking shot. Like I very much remember that at the time. And I think part of that was fed by the fact that by the time I saw the movie, which is very early, but in all the reviews, it was like, and you guys are not going to believe this tracking shot. Like that was a big part of like the marketing and like the sort of early press for the movie, not the marketing, the early press for the movie. So I think I went in with my sort of like, well, let's just see like what this is, you know, kind of like arms crossed sort of vibe to it, which is the terrible way to go into watching anything, right? Experiencing anything. And I feel like at the moment I was like, oh, that's good. But like, I'm kind of put off by it. And I wasn't, and I remember distinctly feeling like once Saoirse Ronan was out of the movie, that the movie really kind of lost its steam in many ways, lost its motor in many ways. And watching it this time, you know, just to put my kind of cards on the table right now, I liked it more than I liked it when I saw it originally. I think this is a really, really good movie. And I think I was too hard on the second part of the movie originally. I think all the stuff, the war stuff is all fantastic. All the Keira Knightley, James McAvoy stuff is fantastic. I do think the movie does suffer because Saoirse Ronan can no longer be in the movie once we're in that point. Her performance in the first half of the movie is so dynamic and forceful and just like, who is this person? Like you get that feeling when you're watching, even now, even knowing that she's been nominated for 3 Oscars and, you know, is one of those people now, like you still get that feeling like, oh my God, like this girl is so young and she is just bringing this full force, not child performance, full force performance to this movie. And then the actress who plays her, like the 5 years later timeline, whose name is, I think, equally hard to say.
Romola Garai?
Romola Garai.
That sounds like a Star Wars character. I like that name.
Does admirably. She's not bad, but she fully feels like she was cast because of how much she looks like Saoirse Ronan at times. Like there are a couple shots when she's talking to that like dying soldier where you're like, oh my God, this looks, I was like, did they superimpose Saoirse Ronan's face on this girl because it looks just
no, they
like
didn't
her.
do that shit back then.
No,
This is the before time. This is a good time.
Yeah.
I agree. And Vanessa Redgrave too, playing the
Yes.
a much older version of that character. It's really great casting. I agree with you very much that Saoirse Ronan is so good in this movie. The character is so interesting, particularly that version of the character. Right? Like we've seen, I think we've seen, 18-year-old Briony, and we've seen elderly looking back on her life, reflecting on what she did as a child. We've seen characters like that before, but I think it's how incredible that character is, psychology of that character is, and like you said, this performance that is this really fully realized performance. Like a thing that pulls me out of movies, I don't know if we've really had a chance to talk about this on the show yet, child actor performances that are not up to snuff, that are not great. And look, I'm not going to be a dick about it, right? Like if you're 10 years old and you're not delivering like an Oscar caliber performance in some, mainstream big budget comedy or something like that, I mean, you can do things from there. It's not the end of your career, and lots of really interesting actors have started. Ryan Gosling was on the Mickey Mouse Club,
Right? Yeah.
And so it's not to say I haven't seen Wicked yet, but like Ariana Grande is a good example of that. Which is it Grandy? I heard it's Grandy.
No, I think it's pretty sure it's Grande. I'm pretty sure I've never.
Now I gotta
heard
look up the YouTube video on that. No, I feel like I read that somewhere. Anyway,
okay.
That's an example of someone who has kind of come into her own, like really in terms of acting. That was a child star. You know, what they were doing on those Nickelodeon shows and things like that was not the full breadth of what they could do. Yeah. This movie doesn't have that problem at all because, like you said, it's got this incredible performance. And there's great actors throughout this movie. Everyone in it, McAvoy is fantastic. And it's just another handsomely mounted production.
It very much
the
is.
one we saw last week.
Yes.
But like, it's so centralized on this one character and on this one performance, and particularly that 13-year-old version of her. It can't help but suffer a little bit, as you said, when she's not in it, which it's a unique, very sort of novelistic structure also, where you've got, about the first, say, 45% of the movie is what you were saying, the English country house, the intrigue that happens there. And then we get into the wartime period, and then we have like sort of a lengthy epilogue where she's older, and because she can't really come back, we do miss her. Not because she's super likable, of course, but because she's just fascinating, and you can't really have that later in the movie. So I think that's I don't know if that's a criticism, but it's certainly a valid point about the movie that, it's just, that some movies have like an incredible opening sequence that they can never live up to. It's kind of like a longer form, like Saving Private Ryan is a great movie. But like when you think back to that, you're thinking about the D-Day sequence and you're not thinking about what comes after. There's some great stuff that follows that. I think that movie has a really nice ending and some great character stuff in between. But the core of that movie is the D-Day sequence, which was like, we'd never seen anything like that before. And I think Atonement has that same problem where, and then, to sort of compensate for it, it's like, well, here's this incredible tracking shot, which we'll talk about. Maybe not as show-offy as I initially thought it was. I read a little bit about why it was what it was, but like the coolest thing you can do with the camera still sort of pales in comparison to just what the characterization and the performance are from her in the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said, it's not the movie's fault. There's nothing the movie can do, right? She can't pass as 19 or 18 or whatever. You can't bring her along. And obviously the story...
No, and there's no point to flashback, right? Like
we get one of them. We get that one flashback of her.
But we've seen kind of what we need to see of that period, and now we need to kind of move forward. Yeah.
That scene where you see the one other flashback where she jumps in the river and had to have, McAvoy save her, they tie it in because she's writing the story, right, in that moment. But I really do feel like it was them being like, we got to get another scene insertion in here. Again, not the movie's fault. The story is what it is. The novel is what it is. And, Wright kind of came in and said, like, I guess the original script was sort of moving away from the structure of the novel. And Wright came in and was like, no. We've got to structure this like the novel. Like, that's what makes the story special. And he's right. Like he's not wrong in that fact.
I think that's a great choice. The original idea was to do a lot of the reflective stuff as voiceover.
Yeah, which is crazy.
To do it visually, like there's some wonderful just shots at the end of Vanessa Redgrave kind of just not saying anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it must be a makeup thing. The mole on her face is the same mole.
Yeah,
Like she looks exactly, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen in a movie a much, much older version of the character look that much like the younger act. Like, that could be her grandmother or something.
Yeah.
And I think that's really nicely done too.
And that's the other thing that they kind of do dirty with the middle actress, which is like you've got Saoirse Ronan, then you got Vanessa Redgrave kind of bookending this actress who, when you look her up, she really hasn't done much like anything big really other than this, really, and it's not her fault. She's also kind of straddled with something that Redgrave isn't, which is they want her to kind of take up Ronan's mannerisms a lot of the time in those scenes. And it's like, it comes off sometimes a little bit too much at times. There are great scenes. The scene where that soldier is dying is fantastic, and she's fantastic in it. There are those moments that break through, but the movie just loses a lot of juice when she's not there. When it's the scenes between McAvoy at war and when it's him and Knightley, those scenes still feel like they have the same energy as the first 45 minutes. Just when we're with Briony, again, I felt like this way back then, and I feel that less so now, but still have that feeling of, man, the movie just needs her to be in it for this period, because and again, the book also does it where the second era is very close to the first era. If it was like, 20 years later, it was like a middle-aged group of people, a different sort of vibe, right? Then I think you would be less missing Ronan at that point, because you're like, okay, this person's so much older. But they're like, it's been 4 years. And you're like, man, you're a totally different person. And these two people aren't exactly the same people, So it's like, it's one of those things where the language of movies sometimes just makes it difficult, right? In a book, it doesn't matter. Here, obviously, there is like a visual representation of a person. So again, it's not the movie's fault. I don't want to keep harping on it. That's why I'm talking about it now at the beginning, because I don't want to keep bringing it up, because I feel like it'll be a boring thing to keep bringing up when we're really digging into the movie.
And you want to bore people right away.
Exactly. Let's get the boring stuff out of the way. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yep.
But it is like my biggest, I think, feeling on the movie, and why I think, other than one other kind of thesis I have on the movie, which we'll get to later, keeps me a little bit separated from just being like, man, this is, 100% fantastic. There's just a little bit of separation that I think is created by the movie, which, for that reason and one other reason, which we'll get into, that's my tease for later. That's the excitement that we'll talk about later.
Well, I got one of those too. It might be the same one, which could also be. There's your Shyamalan twist for
the exciting, juicy, crowd-pleasing Atonement talk in 2025.
Film at 11. Yeah.
We should start just going through and talking about, I guess, what the movie is. This first 45 minutes, like you said, we start, and I'm not sure exactly the year. Do they ever put the year exactly on it? I mean, we could probably guess it, because it's like 5 years before Dunkirk, right? Or 4 years before
35? I want to say 1935.
Okay.
I think there is a title, yes.
Yeah.
I will say, so this movie, the score is incredible. Dario Marianelli. It incorporates this typewriter percussion that I really, really like a lot. I will say one of the things that this film did this time that I was a little, I felt it kind of on the nose, is the titles, when the typewriter font sort of coming up in tune with the music. I really like the music. I really like that motif. I really like that choice. There's some incredible stuff later on. Like there's this great scene in that sequence you were just talking about with 18-year-old Briony, where she's a part of the nurse corps in the hospital. Yeah. And there's this group of nurses kind of going down the hallway in tune with this like typewriter clackety music that kind of runs through the entire film. I love that. The typewriter font sort of very obviously, bringing up the title and the year and the place and all that stuff. I thought that was a little bit much, but that's a nitpick.
So maybe kind of what you're talking about, maybe we should talk about my other take on this movie, which is the thing I think that feels like it's separating me from it, is that
we're going to get to that already?
Yeah.
I thought we're saving that for the paying customers.
I can't save it up right now, because you just kind of brought up what you're saying is a natural segue into what I want to say about it. So I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to talk about it, which is this entire movie.
Everybody.
This entire movie is encapsulating what you just said about that moment with the score and the typing out the thing. It just is a little too much all of the time. There's this expression, right? And an expression, but this type of person that people call a theater kid, right? Which is like, a theater kid is somebody who is like, I'm just so into acting and the performance, and I just love this, and I'm not going to hide how much I love this, right? Like, and there are plenty of actors, I would say, like someone like Joseph Gordon-Levitt is someone who got tagged with this very much in his career, which is like just a guy who is like, I I love this. I love that I'm acting. I love doing voices. Like, I'm going to do a Edward Snowden impression. Did anybody ask for it? No, but I'm going to show up to set and I'm going to do an Edward Snowden impression. I worked for 6 months on doing this, and I'm going to fully commit to it. That is very, you mostly hear that talked about with actors, right? Joe Wright feels a little bit like the theater kid version of a director, which is he obviously
try hard the right phrase for this?
Very try hard.
Okay.
Yes, he loves directing. He loves movies. He loves the stuff you can do in movies, right? The artifice of movies. He obviously loves. He loves tracking shots. He loves, perspective shots. He loves close-ups. He loves playing with match cuts. He loves sound design. He loves all of this stuff, and all of this stuff in this movie is very, very good. I want to say that first. It's very, very good, but at all times it is calling your attention to the fact that
it's very good.
It's very good, and this is a movie, and isn't it very good? And there are times where you get really lost in it, but there are so many times where you're just like, you find yourself being like, oh, that's really cool. And they're like, I should not be saying that if I'm involved in the narrative and the propulsion of this movie, right? And that's kind of, I think, how I felt about it even, 15, 17 years ago, whatever. But I didn't really know how to articulate it in that way then. And watching this time, that's the thing I was most left with, which I was like, there's just every little thing. Like, there's these cool moments, and I think they're so thought out and interesting, but there's a moment where, like, I don't know if it's McAvoy or whoever does, like, breathes out like cigarette smoke, and it like match cuts it to mist, like, on this field as they walk through it. So cool. Love it. My, like, editor brain loves it. It, like, tickles the editor brain.
Little mini Lawrence of Arabia cut.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, cool. He does it like 5 or 6 times in really interesting ways. Some of them more subtle than others. Some of them very obvious. The tracking shot is one of those things, right? The score is one of those things. The sound design is one of those things. Everything is very, very in your face. Like, look at how much I can make a movie. Like, that's what it feels like. And it just makes a little bit of separation of, I really appreciate this, from I'm really in love with this, and I can never cross that gap with this movie because I am always feeling this is a movie, like, this is a movie. You're constantly reminding me this is a movie, and I'm impressed by your skill, but I cannot cross the gulf into I love this as a movie. So that's like my main takeaway from watching it.
All right, so we have also then segued into what I was going to say about this. And again, this is not my original idea. It's just something that I saw in a review, and it kind of made me, recontextualize what I saw. So I don't remember, and again, I sent you some quotes from reviews, and this wasn't one of them, but I don't remember who it was, so apologies in advance. I'm sure that critic is listening to the show ardently right now and is like, I can't believe he didn't give me credit for this. But so what I wanted to say about this movie, and what made me sort of take it from the level where you're at to something a little bit beyond that, and seeing it the second. So first of all, I'll blow up my own spot. When I saw this in 2007, I was fucking enamored with this movie, right? And, like, none of that artifice. I was like, this is great. This is top tier filmmaking. This is an incredible story. It's beautifully acted, beautifully shot. The direction is, it's so good. I was, I really, really liked this movie. And it was a year, as we've said, that was just full of really great cinema. Like, it's just such a cool period to be going to the movies as regularly as it was at the time. So at the time, I didn't think this at all. I start watching it this time, in 2025 now, and I'm like, this is still great, but yeah, as you were saying, you kind of do see the showiness of it, the artfulness of it. That sort of, it is a very emotional story. It's a very personal story, but it's done in these kind of broad strokes and these things that, like you were saying, really call attention to themselves a lot, like the tracking shot, like those cuts, like the music and the syncing of the footsteps to the typewriter on the soundtrack. This review, and I don't remember exactly how this person said it, but I thought it was a great idea. When we get to the end of this movie, what we realize is what we are seeing is not the story as it happened. We are seeing the story as it was remembered by this very sort of precocious, this artistic, creative, this theater kid, which is Briony, right? Like, she has been that. We see her in the very, very beginning of this movie, right? Like, the first thing we see, she's finished this play that she's written, right? the typewriter. It's that scene where this very, very sort of creative, gifted child, she writes a play called The Trials of Arabella, which is this very classical sounding, you can tell she's read her mythology and she's read her Shakespeare and all that stuff. And, everything is flowery and everything is just this purple prose. And she sort of sees the world in these, big dramatic things. Like she sees this movie kind of hinges on this moment, right? Where two of them really. So she sees her older sister and the James McAvoy character out by the fountain. And it's this very innocent thing that they're going through, but she sees it as some kind of horrible sexual game that they're playing or something. And then she actually comes upon them having sex in the library, up against the wall, kind of not moving. Like no one actually does that like that, right? Like that is a very movie thing.
Yeah.
And it's a great looking shot, Keira Knightley in the green dress, the pose. It almost looks like, a dance performance or something, right? It's like a freeze frame, a pause. What do you call that? I don't know anything about dance.
A tableau?
A tableau. There you go. There's a few tableaus in this movie.
Yes,
because the one that really struck me, and I'll come back to the point, when Robbie is arrested and everyone is kind of standing on the front steps of the country house, right? And everyone is perfectly arranged there. There's like 5 or 6 characters. They're all standing the exact same distance apart. It's very stagey. It is very artificial. So my take on this movie now, having seen it a second time, is we are seeing all of this through the imagination of Briony. So nothing is meant to be as it happened. This is all, a very creative, very precocious, very sort of romantically minded and philosophically minded, child. She grows up over the course of this movie, but she is seeing the world in a very particular perspective. And until we get to those closing scenes with Vanessa Redgrave, which I do take as reality, right?
Yes.
I think everything else, and some of this is said, right? Like there are scenes in this that she specifically, signals I wasn't there and I just kind of made up the details. I did the research and I made up the details and I invented part of the story. I think in some sense we are meant to see all of this as, kind of playing out in her mind, in her imagination, as it sort of is crossed over with her memory rather than, the way it actually happened. Like imagine her walking in on her sister and this guy in the library and, the way she sees it in this movie. I'm sure it wouldn't have actually been like that, but the movie stages it that way because when you're 13 and you don't really understand how those things work, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how people have sex is they stand very close to each other up against a wall very quietly.
Well, I say there is
maybe that's a British thing. I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
I could be wrong.
I mean, I will say in that scene, Keira Knightley does stop them from moving because she goes like somebody just walked in or whatever, so that's why they freeze. But I think that's an awesome take. I think that's a really interesting take on it, and I don't disagree with you, right? I think that we are meant by the end to realize, right, that we have sort of been seeing this. Everything. As almost the book that, Briony has written, right?
And that's, this movie is very much about that, right? About writing something that is inspired by what you know, but also, you can take some liberties with it. And I do think that's a really important point here. So I guess the question then is, does that, that doesn't mean you have to still love this movie, right?
Right.
Doing that doesn't necessarily mean, well, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a way of looking at it that does sort of excuse, and maybe that's what I'm doing, right? Maybe I'm just sort of justifying these things, but I do think, looking at the movie in that way, looking at it as this meta sort of subjective, very, very subjective thing that is about the way we sort of, view the past in a certain way, the rose-colored glasses idea. If we take that as sort of a major theme and a major idea in this movie, I think that, like, for me, that makes it a better movie. And still, at the core of this is this personal thing, this accusation that is made falsely. And she kind of knows she's making it falsely. And she knows in some sense what the consequences are going to be. And she spends the rest of her life trying to make up for Atonement. Is the title of the movie.
Yeah.
So I do think there is something that we can really sort of grasp on in that sort of way, that like deeply emotional, personal sort of way. But also we kind of have to look at the artifice of this in a, in sort of a more critical way also, right? Like this is not meant to be and that sort of, I mean, it kind of takes you into a whole other realm of discussion about movies, right? Like, are we meant to sort of see all movies that way, right? Like movies, I talk about this in my classes all the time, right? Like the great Mark Cousins, you know Mark Cousins, the Irish critic, Mark Cousins? He has a 10-part documentary called The Story of Film and Odyssey, which you should sign off right now and just go watch the whole thing. I will wait for you.
Okay.
10 hours.
Okay.
But I show in my class, there's like opening segment, and it shows a couple of scenes from movies, and he calls movies an empathy machine, right? It's this idea that when we are watching a movie, we are feeling for these people on screen, even though we know they're not in actual danger. We know they're not actually in love. We know they're not actually dying or, falling for someone or being betrayed or whatever. But in the moment, right, we feel for them as if they were real people. And there is that disconnect there, right? Like the actors playing the scene, they know they're not actually being stabbed, but they are sort of putting themselves in that mind space of
right.
I guess that's just, my mind immediately goes to people being stabbed, whatever that says about me. But like, what does that say about sort of our relationship to movies? And like, is Atonement a movie about movies, maybe? Or am I just being that pretentious guy that I sometimes, it's my dark alter ego. That
here's what I'll say.
Out.
I think what you're saying about this idea of the story being something that is a story, right? And we're experiencing the interpretation of these events through Briony's eyes, right? And not the actual events. And that I feel like that, creates interesting questions about, the actions of the characters or, how events kind of play off each other or how they stack up and their chronology and how they work. Obviously, one of those scenes is a huge aspect of the turning of the story, right? But the thing I think it doesn't solve for me, right, is that if you fully embrace that idea, right, then you're going meta onto meta, which is I'm supposed to feel for these characters I know that aren't in danger or really going through something from the movie artifice side of it. But then you're also asking me to then care about these characters who, in the world of the movie, aren't in danger, aren't whatever, because it's all written from a story, whether it gets based on something true, but it's a story, right? So that is, I think, doesn't really fix my problem. It might even enhance it a little bit, because then it's like, well, then what is my grasp on the James McAvoy character then? Like, do I have to look past James McAvoy to his character Robbie, but then through, Briony's interpretation of who Robbie is into Robbie as a person, right? So I think like...
Right. And like, if you want to see the devastation of Dunkirk, there is a movie that came out not too long after this called Dunkirk, which is not that, right? Like it is meant to be, we are meant to take that much more literally than I think we are meant to take what's in Atonement. Yeah. Basically, they're about the same thing, and not entirely. I mean,
but there are a lot of similar themes and I was struck after having seen Dunkirk, now watching this, being like, oh, there's that boat that was in Dunkirk, stuff like that. But so I'm like, oh, Joe Wright also got these details very right. That's one of the things that I thought was interesting. But, and we'll talk about that when we get to that scene, because I think, or in just general, details are something I think he's very strong about, right? I think he's a very detail-oriented director. But, I think like, if you want to play with those themes that you're talking about, these sort of like meta themes of this being a story, I don't think it gets all the way to solve my problem of the fact that it feels like a movie all the time. Like that reminding me it's a story, that is one thing, right? But constantly me feeling like, okay, I'm watching a very skilled director do skillful director things, right? That's my main problem, not necessarily like the detachment from the characters or the story, because I do feel like the characters are great. Like we talked about, the performances are across the board really fantastic. And I do lock in when there are certain moments. I really do lock into stuff that's going on. And that's why I think, and especially that first 45 minutes, right? Even though it has the sound design and it's got the music, which you said about the music really quickly, we kind of dived off it almost immediately. As soon as the first like notes of the score happened in the very beginning, I was like, oh my God, I forgot how much I loved this score. I was obsessed with it in like 2007 or whatever when it came out. I like loved it. And when it won the Oscar, I was like, oh my God, perfect. Like, I don't love this movie, but like, this is really great win. That first 45 minutes, what I really looked at when I was watching is, last time we talked about Pride and Prejudice, I was like, man, there are way more tracking shots and tricks and stuff like this. And then I remembered, but in that first 45 minutes, he really, I think, intentionally doesn't do any of that, right? There aren't long tracking shots that go through from one place to another. It is a lot of just beautifully composed, images, beautifully lit with interesting perspectives or interesting framings and stuff like that. Like he's doing throughout. Yes.
Interesting framings all over this movie.
Yes. Doing really interesting framings and some of those match cut stuff, but he saves that tracking shot for that one moment. That's really the only time it exists. And I was really impressed by that in that first 45 minutes because I was like ready to be like, okay, are there like 4 other tracking shots I didn't realize were in this movie that I wasn't thinking about? And there really aren't. You know, he really is trying to be a little bit more naturalistic, a little bit more, you know, like with the characters, you know, a lot more stuff like, you know, in Pride and Prejudice is that shot where you see, you know, the older sister getting taken away on the carriage and it's like behind Keira Knightley's shoulder, you know, back, and like it goes out of focus. It starts in focus and goes out of focus and kind of pulls back to sort of like put her in focus. Like there's a lot that kind of stuff going on in that first 45 minutes.
It's one of my favorite things we talked about in Pride and Prejudice, the Keira Knightley on the swing.
Right. No.
Twirling around, you know, revolving on the swing, and we kind of see the world pass by.
Yeah,
circulate around her. I love that shot very much. There's nothing quite like that except for the tracking shot. But yeah, it's and I guess that makes it maybe stand out more also because we don't really have anything, you know, even the war stuff up to that point. It's they're like in a basement, you know, it's kind of dimly lit, and you know, then they're trekking across a field or something, and it's not anything that we haven't really seen before. It's well done for what it is, but it's not showy. It's not sort of over the top in any way. There's no aside from that beach sequence where there's, you know, thousands of extras there. Mm-hmm. It's mostly just 3 guys kind of, which I love war movies where they really bring it down to like a very small group of characters kind of surviving on their own. I think that's always more interesting than those like big scale battle scenes kind of thing. So yeah, it does. It kind of sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb. Once they arrive, like, you know, like even if all you know about this movie is there is a long tracking shot in it, when they first step onto that beach, it's like, oh, here it goes. It's like 2 seconds into it, it's like, all right, so just check your watch. We got a long way to go here.
Yeah, and it's a great tracking shot. Don't get me wrong. It's a fantastic tracking shot. But going back to that first 45 minutes, I think we start out with Saoirse Ronan right off the bat, and she's writing this play, and I think there's an incredible economy of storytelling and character work done very, very fast, because you sort of understand who this girl is within the first like 10 minutes of the movie. The first 10 minutes you really spend with her, you really learn kind of everything about her, right? She's incredibly smart, right? But she craves attention. She craves attention. Right? She has a little bit of an ego, right?
And she really needs everyone to appreciate how brilliant she is.
Yeah, she's used to getting what she wants. You know, you can definitely, again, this movie, much like Pride and Prejudice, and this is a very British thing, right, is very invested in this class idea, right, of like, she's kind of obsessed with this handsome but like lower class guy who, you know, I think in her mind, she thinks like, well, obviously, even though I'm younger than him, he'll be with me because look at my station in life.
I'm so much better than him.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the upstairs, downstairs thing.
Exactly, yeah. And you get all of that very quickly. And there are a couple shots where Ronan doesn't say a word, and she just she's just looking, and you're like, there is so much complexity happening in the looks that you're giving right now. It's crazy. I was obsessed with this performance in 2007 when it happened, and I'm still obsessed with it now. It's one of those, like, just, once again, like, shotgun, like, performances where you're like, this person's going to be around forever. Because, like, to be able to hold the screen like this when you're 13 years old is not many people can do it, right? And she really commands this first 45 minutes of the movie. And that's with other great performances happening at the time. I think McAvoy is fantastic in this movie.
He's great, yeah.
So young, so handsome.
And was nominated for some awards also.
Yeah, so handsome. It was but like, just, you really buy it, right? You really buy. Sorry, him and Knightley are really good together. And although that scene, the love scene is very staged, the build up to it is very hot. Like, they're very,
absolutely,
they're so good together, and you really feel it right between them. And I think Knightley, well, I don't think this is as good a performance as her Pride and Prejudice performance, because I do feel like what you see in this movie is something that she got kind of saddled with for a lot of her career, especially in this era, which is she has to play like the sad, pretty girl, right? That's right. Like, she gets saddled with that for most of the second half of the movie. And it's like, I feel like it wastes a little bit of her talents. So have you seen the opening 45 minutes where she's able to play a lot of different, layers, right? Which is Sometimes she's, petty. Sometimes she's silly.
She's a little bit aloof. Yeah. There's that
Aloof,
scene
yeah.
with her and her brother and Benedict Cumberbatch's
Yeah.
character where she's just kind of lying out, by the pond on a diving board or something and
Yeah.
just ignoring it. Like she's kind of a bitch in a lot of
absolutely,
ways.
yeah.
And, by the second half of this movie, she's a saint. And
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, it's very hard to compare anything to Elizabeth and Pride and Prejudice, this very witty sort of this character who is, kind of like Briony, right? Like commenting on the world while also being part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't really get a chance to do that here, but she looks great. She's, emotionally engaging throughout. It's not her movie.
No, it's not her movie. Absolutely not. It's not her movie.
This one's not.
Yeah, no, this is not her movie. 100% not. I totally forgot Cumberbatch was in this movie.
And I would have not seen him in anything.
No, I wouldn't have known he was in it at the time.
At this point, but I think I watched that a little bit later. So
Me too.
Boy, is he just disgusting in this movie.
Very disgusting. Like the worst.
And as I texted you, I was like, holy shit, like, it right away.
Yes.
One of the things that was nice, I love this, right? Like movies from this period, a lot of them I just really appreciated a lot. Haven't seen them since they came out. So this was one of those until a couple of years ago, Pan's Labyrinth, which I mentioned before, which has become one of my favorite movies, was another one of them. And it's like, you just are so surprised by certain things. It's like seeing it with fresh eyes, seeing it as an older person. I really love that. Like I remember there was kind of a twist at the end of this movie, but I forgot what it was. And there's this, about 20 minutes before the end of this, there's this really happy ending, this sort of nice resolution to everything. And I was like, I don't remember that happening at all. And then it pulls the rug out from under you, like right after that. And I was like, oh, you got me twice again, movie. Good on you, Atonement. So it's such an enjoyable thing to know that you really loved a movie from, like, I think that's, between 17 and 23 years or 25 years ago, you saw it the first time and it's been that long and you come back to it and you remember the broad strokes, right? Like I kind of remembered what this character was like. I remembered the structure of the story, but I didn't remember. I remember it was pretty heartbreaking, but I didn't remember exactly why. And, so you get to sort of have your heart broken by it all over again. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beginning of the movie does a really interesting job of setting up a little bit of what that twist, let's say. It's like, I feel like it's a little bit mean to call it a twist. That seems like
sure. It's
but what else are you going to call it, really?
Right,
a turn, whatever you want to call it. And just twist makes it feel like it's like, and you didn't know he was dead the whole time. like that. He was never even there. Like that's what it feels like it would be, right? But like, I forgot how quickly they get into the switching up the perspectives, where it's like you see her for 15 minutes and then it's like you immediately go to like you switch over to Knightley's perspective. Right. And again, very showy, but a very cool like transition where she sort of like slams that cabinet and it like goes to like Knightley slamming the door as she walks through or whatever.
Another one with McAvoy comes up to the door and like rings the bell that's hanging down. Then we get that exact same shot again. Yeah. It does a Rashomon thing.
It does. Yeah. And
which really I also completely forgot about.
And it really sets up like this, I think what is, really the central theme of the movie, other than, right, this, can you ever really atone for something this terrible, right, that you knowingly did, right, is this idea of, perspective and what we see as true and what we don't, and the factors and elements that make us perceive things the way that we perceive them, right? And that scene by the fountain is obviously the first one we sort of get this, flipped sort of perspective on, right? And we get the same thing, from, both perspectives. And I feel like you really get that idea of like, oh, this scene, like when they actually are by the fountain together, when you're actually in their part of it, is very charming and like, very cute and very flirty. And like, it has all of that sort of, unspoken feeling stuff all there,
And yet seeing it the first way we see it from Briony's window, it does seem pretty ominous.
Yeah, it looks like he's like telling her to do weird things. Like he's like, stop. Like when she's like,
like reluctantly, but also kind of almost like she's forced into it. She jumps into the fountain and she gets soaked and kind of shows him her body.
Yeah.
She doesn't look like she wants to be doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's all staged really perfectly, I would say.
Yeah. And then,
it's Hitchcockian. It's a very, the first time we see it is very Hitchcock.
Yeah. And then
it's the view through the window.
When the brother shows up, when Benedict Cumberbatch shows up, we get, I think, a really, really hammered home this idea of class, which is this whole thing where we get this whole idea of like they both went to Cambridge. We find out that her and the McAvoy character both went to Cambridge together, and she didn't speak to him the whole time they were there, right? So it's like, okay, is this idea of like, well, because he's kind of lower class, or then we come to kind of realize like, oh, maybe it's because she already had these feelings sort of brewing a little bit, but she didn't want to admit it. But then we get the way
it's not just that he is of lower class than her, but his mother is literally like their servant.
Yes.
So she is, again, it's the Downton Abbey, which I've seen one episode of. Right. It's that thing, right? Like not only are they in different social strata, but like literally it is her family and his family. They have this working relationship and you can't really cross those boundaries.
Yeah. And, the Alfie Allen character, he going to play Theon Greyjoy and, in Game of Thrones, which is crazy. It's one thing I was like, oh my God.
Which at the time I'd be like, oh, that's Lily Allen's brother. Cool.
He's,
And now it's like, oh, Lily Allen is David Harbour's wife.
Yeah, well, not anymore.
No, that's right.
But their other kind of like servant or her other son, right? The other kind of like person who helps out, they treat him way worse, right, than Robbie because they don't know him as well. And like,
he's not as handsome.
Yeah, not as handsome. She's very dismissive. She's like, it's the room with the big blue walls or whatever. Like, oh God, can you believe this poor idiot doesn't know where the right room is? Doesn't know what like this named room is in our house or whatever, so you got that vibe to it, right? And then, the way they sort of like, talk about them when they're not there and all that kind of stuff. I think you really start to get the hammer that home, and you really see it too. What I love too is when you see sort of his little cottage that he lives in with his mom, and when the mom kind of finds out they got invited up there, you can see that she's not really like psyched about it, right? That she knows like, look, if these people decide that they're tired of you, or that they kind of don't want you around anymore, they're going to toss you off, or worse. Right. And you're going to get crushed. Right. She doesn't think like something this horrible is going to happen. Right. But she does have this sense of like, honey, you don't understand. Like I know you feel like you grew up with these people, but like the first moment that you're not convenient for them, they're going to throw you away. Right.
Which is not really something that we see in Pride and Prejudice, right? Like there is a class consciousness in that movie too, but I think that one's a lot more sympathetic to the upper class. This one, they are all, flawed at best and, devious and manipulative and horrible, like Paul Marshall, Benedict Cumberbatch's character. There's a lot of rot there that we see in this movie that we don't. And, it's a more modern, more recent period in time.
Exactly.
That has something to do with it. But yeah, this one is much more sympathetic to kind of the working class, the people actually out fighting in the trenches, over in France and stuff like that. And you really get, it's a darker movie in every possible way.
For sure, yeah.
That's just one of the things that, it kind of takes, it's like a curdled version of stuff that we saw in the movie they made a couple of years before this.
Yeah. And, also, and then when Robbie is trying to write this note, right, to apologize.
Boy, this is
it's like the 1930s version of like accidentally sending a dick pic to like a family member or something.
Exactly.
It's like,
but like it's a physical piece of paper, and it like when he's doing it, it's like you're looking right at it, bro.
Yeah.
Come on.
In that moment, though, it's so believable, though, and relatable in that way of like the moment he hands it off to Briony, right, is the moment where he
screams her name.
He puts together like, wait a second, did I take the wrong note? But I do love, right? So she reads it, and this kind of, again, it's another like piece of evidence in her head towards this picture she's putting together, which is mainly birthed by jealousy, right? She wants Robbie. She's way too young for Robbie. He obviously is enamored with her sister, and she is sort of putting together this picture now of him like, well, if I can't be with him, then I'm going to make him into a monster, basically.
I'm going to destroy him.
I'm going to destroy him.
And he kind of gives her a lot of ammunition to do that.
Yes. And at 13, she's not thinking of it like his life is going to be ruined, or not even understanding what that even means, right?
No,
also,
and she does. There's part of her that also thinks she's doing a good thing for her sister. She's standing up for because her mom is kind of distant and aloof, and Cecilia, they have a somewhat closer relationship, and she feels like she kind of needs to protect, because she is.
I think you're being very kind to Briony right now with that part of it.
I mean, it's like that. That's an added bonus, right? Like I get to destroy Robbie, but also do a good thing for my sister, who I am seeking validation from her. her. I think I think it's all pretty selfish, but
I think it's almost 100% selfish.
The patina of selflessness, maybe.
Maybe I think that's what she's maybe using in her brain as an excuse.
Sure,
right?
That's what I mean. Yeah,
but it's not an actual motivation for her, right? It's really just, I want him, I can have him, I'm going to destroy him. And again, this little poor boy's life is not worth anything. So who cares if I destroy it? Right. Yeah. Like that's sort of part of what it is. He's like a plaything, right? Then yes, the mom is aloof. Again, another Succession alum, by the way. She will be in Succession. She plays like Brian Cox's like former wife or whatever.
I'll keep an eye out for her.
She's like the mother of the three main kids or whatever.
Oh, so that's a pretty big role then.
Yeah, but she doesn't show up too often. Like she's like out of the picture basically. But this so she reads the note and she gives it to her sister, and her sister immediately knows, right, that she read it because it's not an envelope anymore. She opened this envelope, right? She reads it, and what I love about this little section, and this is where I think Knightley is really, really great because she's allowed to sort of play a little more lightly here. When she answers the door, and McAvoy's immediately like, "It was a mistake. I'm so sorry," but they're very cute together in that moment, right? She's not like, "How dare you? That impropriety of sending me this note." You know what I mean? It's like very nice and flirty and like I think interesting between them in that moment. But we also get that scene where she's talking to her, where Briony's talking to her cousin, right? The Juno Temple character, who at this point has already been assaulted by the Benedict Cumberbatch character, right? We just don't know it. She blames it on, she says, "Oh, I got rope burns. I got Indian burns from my little brothers or whatever," you know? But that's not true, obviously, because we know Cumberbatch has like a...
Don't they call them Chinese burns?
Chinese burns.
Is there a non-racist way to express what that particular childhood thing is?
Not in this era, for sure.
I was like, I've never heard them called that before. That's also terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense they wouldn't call it that there because there are no Native Americans there.
I know. I'm just saying.
But yes, equally as racist. Yeah.
Those are the worst.
I mean, I was thinking about the other day because I was talking about my son. I was like, have you ever has any of your friends ever done this thing where they like, rub their hands on your arm enough to until it hurts? They're like, no. He's like, no, what is it called? I was like, it's definitely not called what they used to call it.
Yeah, what is the PC way to... That's what I'm saying. There is no PC way to describe that. And like, it has nothing to do with any culture.
No.
It's a stupid thing that boys do to each other.
Yeah. But anyway, so... Again, Juno Temple, another person who obviously very famous now. She's been in a lot of movies. Was in Ted Lasso. Going to turn into a star in her own right. I was floored that she was in this movie. No part of my brain knew that she was in this movie at all.
Well, she's the one who has to play like two pretty disparate ages, right? And actually is pretty convincing in both, right? Like, how old is that character supposed to be in the opening sequences?
No, probably around the same age as Briony, right? 13, 14.
That's what I thought, but she is definitely older later when we see her getting married.
Yeah, but I mean, she doesn't have to really speak or anything, in that part. She just kind of, she just sort of gets seen in that moment, But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think she's probably a little bit older than Saoirse Ronan anyway. So
or something.
I think she's playing down in age a little bit at first.
Young enough where what he does is despicable.
Terrible.
But, yes. Old enough where she's, sort of gets it, I guess.
Yeah, terrible and despicable, obviously.
Oh man, Cumberbatch.
But in this scene, you really see...
So likable elsewhere.
I know.
So hateable here.
You really see that with Briony, and this is the scene where I think really cements Briony as, I think, sort of the villain of this story, right? Which is that she is sort of intentionally trying to rile up the Juno Temple character against Robbie, so she sort of has like this case that she's building, right? And she needs sort of people to be helpful to her cause, right? And, this idea of like, oh, should we call the police on him and all of this kind of stuff, right? Just give him the note and he'll get taken away for sure, and all of this stuff we're starting to build it up, right? And, I think, again, it's just really amazing that she can pull off this stuff where she is the villain, but you don't hate her, right? You can't hate her because there's part of you that's like, she doesn't really know what she's doing, but she's old enough to kind of know what she's doing, right?
And she does grow out of it, right?
She does, yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, Saoirse Ronan never gets to play that version of the character, but like 13-year-old Briony is, she's a little bit of, there's some sociopathy there later on, and pretty much the rest of her life is spent literally in atonement, right? She is trying to make up for this horrible thing, and she realizes the repercussions of it, she realizes, how bad it actually was as she gets. I mean, that's a really interesting, I love however they're expressed, big ideas. And we talked about this when we talked about Eon Flux, right? I was just listening back to that episode. A big idea expressed in an interesting way. I'm always on board for that. And this movie definitely has that, right? It's, are you responsible for the things that you do when you're at this age where your hormones are sort of overtaking your brain in every possible way? And I think this movie's, again, it's another thing that this movie is about, right? Like, she definitely knows what she's doing is wrong when she's 13, but like, she doesn't have kind of the full picture of how bad it actually is. And by the time she gets that, it's like she becomes basically a monk, right? Like she goes into the most harrowing and strenuous and horrific position, to be a nurse, to be ministering to these dying soldiers every day. And, we see her cleaning bedpans and like dressing wounds and things like that. Like it's all penance. It's all, to make up for this thing that she did. And it's interesting, this movie is like, I think it is sort of suggesting that there is a possibility for redemption for someone like her, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, except I do also think the movie is very, I don't want to say it's brave because it's coming from I think the story, but the way it's portrayed in this is I think you can, a valid take at the end of this movie, watching her talk about how giving them that happiness they never got in life was like a kindness.
That's pretty self-serving too, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's like, you can really read that as like, you're just really trying to make up for something you can't make up for. Like, there's just no making up for this. Like, you couldn't make up for it. The only way you could really have made up for it was if you had come forward and said something earlier and stopped him from having to go to war and dying in war, and your sister dying in a train tunnel during the London bombing.
Horrific scene that is, yeah.
I was terrified. That scene terrified me. That's like my nightmare,
Mine too, dude. I don't mind heights at all. I love heights. I ski, mountains are my place. Underground and deep underwater, I can't do that.
Yeah. I'm afraid of heights and I'm afraid of water. So those are both, I'm not afraid of water, but I'm afraid of like that, like, like huge amounts of uncontrollable water, I should say, not water. I mean, but yeah. So like at the end, I'm like, listen, lady, like this is a great performance. And like, I get what you're saying. And I feel bad for you that you have this horrible disease, but it's one of those things where you're like, you kind of deserve everything that came to you. You ruined this person's life without really a care. Right. Because there's that moment again, flashing back. We'll play this like the movie plays it, or like the movie structure. That moment where McAvoy is getting taken away. Right. And she's watching. Right. We'll flash back again. But when McAvoy walks up with the two kids who have gone missing. Right. You see this moment in her, like the slight tick in her face where she's like, wait a second. Like, was I wrong? Like that moment. But you can really think, is you thinking, was I wrong? Or shit. Is the fact that he brought back these kids going to make them think I was lying, right? Because how could he have done this and then also found the kids? Is it gonna save it? But then when he eventually gets taken away, when she's watching and she's watching that all that red light on her face and everything, and maybe it's just the fact that I don't know what the direction was. I don't know if Wright was like just almost be as a neutral expression as possible so people can sort of interpret how they want it. But I swear there's like a little bit of a satisfied look on her face when she's watching it.
I saw it too. Sure.
But the fact that it's that subtle, again, this is one thing about the performance. It's such a great performance. You're like, man, like they could have gone way farther. She could have smiled very, very, very plainly, or something, right?
Well, I mean, even the scene leading up to that, right? Like the assault, when we know that it's Cumberbatch's character and like it's ambiguous enough. I wouldn't say it's ambiguous, but it's close enough to being ambiguous where, not that we suspect that it's anybody other than him, but like the quickness of it, the way that it's staged and the way that it's shot, the way that she plays that scene, there is like a tiny little piece of you that's like, I guess she might have thought she was telling the truth.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You can almost believe that you think that she's telling the truth. And there's, like you said, there's no way that we would believe that it was him.
And there's a moment like that later on, actually, and it kind of mirrors that. It's an interesting little scene where it's later when she's 18 and she sees a guy that she thinks is Robbie and she goes up to him and she says, Robbie, and he turns around. That thing you've seen 1,000 movies where, you think someone is someone else and they turn around and it's a completely different looking person. So I do think it's giving a little bit of weight to that idea that, she might have just kind of seen his face on that guy in that moment and been like, yes, I got him now.
Yeah.
But, could she have actually thought it was him? Maybe. it's not completely discounted.
But I think the conversation with her and the Juno Temple character immediately after pokes holes in that, right? Because you can definitely tell she's trying to convince Juno Temple it was Robbie so that she can feel like I can do this accusation and have a backup.
And just trying to make sure that she's not going to like contradict her story.
Right, exactly.
So there is some deviousness there also.
Yeah, for sure. And, I love when the detective asked her, like, you knew it was him or you saw him?
Yeah.
And then she's like, I saw him with my own eyes. And that's one of the very showy moments because everything around her goes black, right? It's just her in total blackness, right? All around her, but
that's the other thing about Saoirse Ronan is she's like, her hair is like very, very light blonde. Her skin is very pale. So like that contrast, when you shoot her against darkness, like she jumps off the screen kind of.
And they basically have her wearing like a white dress the whole time.
Absolutely.
It's like the only thing is like the only contrast is that black background and her eyes are crazy, man. Like she's got like those blue eyes that are just nuts.
They look like they're painted on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this whole thing, this is the part where I'm most engaged, right, with the movie, because I'm like, what is she thinking? What is going on? What's true? What's not? All of this stuff, right? I had completely forgotten, honestly, which is so weird because it is the moment. I thought it was like she walks in on Robbie and, Cece having sex, and she accuses him based on that and the note. I forgot about the Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, I did too.
Stuff.
Yeah, I guess I must have blocked that out.
Yeah, I forgot there was like an open assault that happened like during this search or whatever. And even that moment where McAvoy walks up with the two kids, and he's got that smile on his face where he's like the whole idea of like, now look what I did.
Very Green Mile.
But it's also it's very much like, I brought these. I found the kids. I'm the hero.
Right.
They're, and now I have this woman that I love. They're gonna accept me because look, I found these kids. Like this great moment, and that smile on his face. And then when he sees her face and how it he realizes something's wrong. But but the look of complete non-understanding. Like there's no way he could possibly understand. What was about to come at him, right? And just heartbreaking. This whole first 45 minutes. I think is really pretty much perfect. Like I think all of this stuff is just so great. And then it goes to the war stuff. And I thought too, I was like, oh, okay. Once the war stuff started going, when he was like walking around France, I shouldn't even call it the war stuff because there isn't like a shot fired other than like a horse's head basically in this movie.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Some animal stuff in this movie.
It's really just them being like, okay, we got sort of left behind and we just got to walk through France to get to, back to our people or whatever. And they're never really in danger. The most danger you feel like they're in is that very first scene, but it ends up being just some nice French people who are bringing them, food or whatever. And you get some of the backstory there where they're, his kind of, I would say, fun, but like the Chris Messina of this movie, which is like his war buddy,
I feel like no one would call him that except for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Having been through what we've just recently been through.
Exactly. But I was like, this is very much that. Like,
absolutely.
That buddy role and like Live by Night or whatever. he's like, you're a ponce. I know, you know all the, French or whatever. And he's kind of like, that's the opposite of what I am. And you've learned that he's in the army because he was in prison and they gave him a choice. He either goes in the army or he stays in prison. And again, hammering home this class stuff, right? A choice that no rich person would ever have to make in their entire lives is a choice he has to make in this moment. Has to go and basically sign his death certificate because, just to get out of jail with the off chance he gets home, right? That's what it is. And, this was where I was like, oh, maybe I was just totally wrong about the second half of this movie because I was like really into this stuff. The scene at the little cafe with him and Keira Knightley is so good. And the way that McAvoy breaks down when he's sort of like, I don't know if I'm worthy of you, like all this stuff that's happened. Like, you don't have to wait for me. Like, you don't owe me anything. This sort of way he starts breaking down was just, I was so enamored with the performance in that moment, And again, the scene is shot very simply, very traditionally. And in these moments where I don't have that separation, I'm like, I'm in. I'm like, okay.
And all with this incredible sense of time and place that Joe Wright very much expressed in Pride and Prejudice as well, where, much like later on, Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, like there is a real sort of grit to this World War II era Europe thing that this movie's doing here. And, like you said, it's not a war movie in the sense that we're seeing these battle scenes. There's not much violence in this movie or anything like that, but everything just has this very lived in, very sort of very precise feel. You know, they said they consulted with historians, obviously, you know, every movie like this does that.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, it's a period piece. Like, you know, one of the complaints about Pride and Prejudice was, you know, it's very masterpiece theater or something. And I guess this is too, but there is, you know, there's these nice little details all over the place in this movie that do kind of give it that verisimilitude and kind of make these scenes work even more than they already do, just with those great performances in them. So yeah, I mean, I like these bits too. I guess I'm a little more like, because the next thing we see is, you know, we're cutting to the hospital.
Yeah.
Where Briony is now 18 and she's doing this thing, you know, what she thinks is going to sort of redeem her for the horrible thing she did as a younger person. And we see what it's like to be a nurse during wartime and, you know, bringing in these like dying soldiers and they're just patching up, you know, she takes the bandage off the guy's head and he's got just a chunk missing out of his skull and we can see his brain. You know, I think those scenes are pretty powerful too. I agree. I mean, it's a little try hard. It's a little overdone. There's you know, that stiff upper lip thing, the move along. It's nothing you can do here. Like that guy's going to die.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, a little overplayed maybe, but I don't know. Those scenes kind of work for me too.
Like, again, none of the scenes fail to work for me. I think most scenes are very good. It's just, and there are times too where I think one of the things it happened in Pride and Prejudice, and it's in this too, it's more in this. Wright is very good at these like montage, like set pieces that he does where, you know, whether it's in that opening sequence where you're sort of getting like the build up to things happening, or it's in this hospital sequence where you're getting the group of soldiers come in and we're kind of just like go, and it's like building and the music is building and we're getting all these kind of like quick like scenes of all this stuff happening, really affecting, right? Really effective as well. And, you know, I think all that stuff really works. And again, like I said earlier, that scene with that French soldier is really good, you know, and this sort of little bit of like confusion about, you know, you know, again, one of the times where you're like, what part of their conversation is real? What part is imagined by her? What part is just him sort of, you know, slipping away? So he's imagining things. There's some amount of reality of like, I knew your last name because your sister used to work here and I've been in this hospital before, right? There's some amount of that, whether or not that's real or she's kind of putting that on him, because there's obviously a lot of stuff he said that's nonsense, right? Like, oh, we're going to get married and like all of this stuff, right? She's never met him before. So, you know, there's all of that stuff that I think is really the moment too where it really hammers home to her, I think, you know, what she's sort of done to Robbie is like what she's seeing these soldiers coming back, because you get a sense like this is really the first time she's seen like combat soldiers since she's been at this hospital, right? She's seen a little bit of like, you know, normal.
Well, she's been a nurse, right? Like I said, one of the first things we see is she's scrubbing bedpans, which was you know, a less hygienic thing back then than it is now.
Yeah.
Again, not my field. I've always said.
Well, then she scrubs her hands really hard with that.
Right. Yeah.
brush.
Like that's the one job I could just never do, and so I have the utmost respect for people who do it. But we see kind of that side of it. But then, yeah, the reality of the war kind of hits in that moment. Like, another great scene. Right. Like, you know, they just all sort of pull up and they're just unloading all of these. And every one of them is, you know, nobody's in good shape at all. Nobody's there for like a fractured ankle or something. Everyone is there with like a grievous sort of war wound. And we see them, you know, it's very, very MASH, I guess. Yeah.
And again, this is one of the things where like, I think it's important in these instances to show the real horrors and depravity of war. But again, there are times where you're just like, okay, Joe, like we know you understand it and you want us to understand it. I don't need like,
won't you just loosen my bandages?
Yeah. I don't need like a 7th shot of somebody missing like 3 limbs. You know, it's like, I get it. Really. I get it. Or, you know, there's that one shot of like the other nurse, like crying, like she's like walked out and she's like crying in another room or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, yes, I'm sure that stuff happened all of the time. And I would feel very bad for this real person, but like, again, you're laying it on a little thick. It's just like that devastating shot, right? When McAvoy is walking through the woods and he finds like all those young like girls killed, right? They're in like that field.
Yeah, I think that's a lot better in terms of, you know, he kind of doesn't react to that in a very obvious way. You know,
he doesn't.
He's speechless, right? Like,
yes.
That's kind of how you react in that situation. It is, you know, it's the most horrific thing ever. And, you know, to break down and have like this big prestige pick moment there is wrong. But
it is wrong. And he underplays it, but he still gives so much emotion.
Yeah.
In a way which I think is great. But yeah, so I mean, I like these scenes again, but this is sort of when we're really in the Briony 18, 19-year-old world is when I think I'm most detached from the movie. And
well, how much of that do we actually see though?
Again, it's not a huge amount, but she's most of the second half. She's at least half of the second half of the movie. Her and McAvoy pretty much split it, the second half of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty well split. So we see her in the hospital. We see that scene with the French soldier, which is a lengthy scene, but not too long. And then
we see the scene in the church
to the wedding, which is
good.
Kind of great because she doesn't get to say anything in that scene. She reacts to it. Then she goes to see her sister, and that's really it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's most of that's a big chunk of the second half of the movie, and it's cutting back and forth a lot. So it's a lot of like, we got the momentum building up, and now I'm feeling a little momentum recede for me, basically, in these scenes.
Well, we're also, that is a thing that this movie does as well. Like, what we are cutting away from that, too, is McAvoy's character, and that is more interesting anyway, right?
Absolutely,
like
yes.
That's a war story. That's it's this guy is trying to get out of Dunkirk, and, they made a whole movie about just that. So I think the other thing is we want to get back to that just because it's so interesting. We really like that character and we want him so badly to survive.
Yeah. Where's Tom Hardy when we need him in this one? You know?
Yeah. He's in The Invitation.
He's not. In 2007, I didn't know anything about the Battle of Dunkirk, right? So that he gets to this beach and I'm like,
okay. Oh, no, I didn't either. I knew nothing until I saw Dunkirk 10 years later.
It seems like a lot of people on this beach. And that's basically what I'm thinking.
Yeah, can we get these people out of here?
What's going on, guys?
Seems like an administrative thing more than anything.
Yeah, and now
let's get more boats, guys. Come on.
Since I've seen Dunkirk, when he shows up in that moment, I'm like, oh shit, he's at Dunkirk.
Yeah, and I had the same reaction because I had seen that movie more recently than this one. I was like, oh, that's where they are, and that's why this is the way it is. And it's I love that's another thing, beyond what we're talking about. Just the way movies are always in dialogue with other movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think that's a very cool thing also.
And in dialogue with you, right? And your sort of like we talk about your place,
your understanding of things,
your understanding of things as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because that had a lot more impact to me seeing it this time. I think just the visuals of it, after having seen Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan film, so that was a big part of it as well. I think for me in this moment, but again, then we get to the Wonder Shot, which we should talk about that now because that's really when this happens, right? We do get the sense right across. I would say this: we get this sense, and again, I'm sure this is obviously in the book, right? Like, even though he's a private, right, he's sort of become like the de facto leader of this group of three people because he's the smartest. Obviously, he has the most drive to get where they're going, right? And he thinks about things in a more strategic manner. But we also find out that he's been shot and, it's not serious, but the bullet is still like in his chest, I guess. I'm like, man, like that seems like a very serious wound that you've got going on.
Well, it's barely shown. He just unbuttons his shirt for
and he's like,
a second.
Man,
we see some blood there. We see, it looks like he cut himself shaving or something. And, it turns out to be a lot more than that. But yeah, I kind of like the way that's played.
And what I do love about the symbolism of that is it's much like the accusation in the beginning of the movie, which is it's this thing that seems like one thing when it happens and then slowly turns into something much, much worse that you can't come back from, right? By the time it kills him.
I mean, I don't know exactly what medically he's suffering from, but he starts to hallucinate pretty quickly.
Well, he gets sepsis. He gets sepsis. That's what it ends up. Yeah, right. He gets a blood infection, basically, is what happens.
Okay, doctor.
She says it at the end. She goes, Robbie died of septicemia, on the beaches of Dunkirk or whatever at the end. That's why I know. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have guessed it otherwise.
I just, like I said, I am that whole world is history, alien to me.
But they get to the beach and they're really trying to figure out like what's going on, right? How do we get out of here? Like, it kind of starts them being like, okay, we just got here. What do we do? And the guy's like, nothing. Just wait.
I love, there's one of my favorite moments in this movie is it's before that. It's leading up to this scene where the three of them are just kind of trekking through this bombed out city. And he has this moment. He's like, I could smell the ocean, which is, the great, like one of my favorite things in life is to walk down those beach, you go over a dune and like, there's the ocean, right? Like every place that I like to be is a place like that.
Mhm.
And he gets to the beach and that's what's there.
Yeah,
It's like the ultimate letdown. It's like there's
Mhm.
thousands of people stranded here in this like apocalyptic hellhole of a beach. It's like, yeah, you can smell the ocean, all right.
Yeah, and it's funny because they come across, like you said, they come across that like dune or whatever, that hill.
Yeah, they kind of make their way through the path there, the cattails or whatever, and here we are.
Yeah, 300,000 men or whatever on the beach. And I think it's interesting because it's like multi-layered for them, right? Because when they first see it, they're like, oh shit, we just walked in the middle of like an operation, right? Something's happening here.
Yeah.
But then it's
right, and after being stranded alone for so long.
Yeah. But then it is, compounded by the fact then they realize, no, it's not an operation. We're just waiting to leave. Like we've been walking all this way and now we just have to wait more. And there's no organization. There's no plan. We have no idea what's going on, and when the officer is like, oh, yesterday the Jerry's blew up 2 boats or whatever. I'm like, oh, I know. I saw that in the in the other movie. Kenneth Branagh was on that dock the whole time. We get this great.
Yeah, it's like, what you need is some fishermen to come over. And save
Don't
you.
worry, Mark Rylance is on the way, but tragedy will strike on the way. His poor son is gonna die because of Cillian Murphy or whatever. But spoilers, I guess, for Dunkirk. But we get this great tracking shot around the beach, but also goes into like the town as well, and it's like
this bar. I love, one of my favorite things is a beach bar. I was like, if I could pick a place to hang out, it's a beach bar.
Probably not this beach bar, though.
This is the beach bar at the end of the world, right? I can't believe there's actually still booze. Like they are like pulling from the taps. I'm like, really? With all those people there, all of these like drunken soldiers and sailors, and they haven't clean this place out yet?
Yeah. Well, they almost have, because when he goes down that basement, there's not a lot left there or whatever, and he's looking for water.
No, there's no water, but there's some booze.
There is some booze. But he, what I love is I love tracking shots that do this, which is we're with our main characters and then we like completely leave our main characters for a while, right? We're like, we separate from them and we go like on a crazy like path without them until they kind of just like, it almost feels like you're running into them, when we see them again.
Right,
and
yeah,
I love
we kind
that.
of reconnect. Well, the third guy, so there's Chris Messina, and then there's the
wait for what the actual actor's name is. I feel bad.
Yeah, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. The black guy who's with them, the heavy set guy,
got the eye patch.
Breaks off from the group. Yeah, the one with the thing on his eye, and we lose him for a while, and then he kind of like comes down the stairs, and we rejoin him, and he kind of joins the group again. It's beautifully staged. I mean, it is stagey. It is a little overdone. It's a little try hard, but also, what an undertaking. Like, have you seen Russian Ark? Okay, I've seen Russian Ark. It's impressive. It's, what it is, right?
Yeah.
Hour and a half, single take movie. They got it, I think, on the third try. That's incredible. That's super
incredible. Cute. Yes.
But like, do I ever want to watch that movie again? Probably not. It's boring as shit. Once you get past the fact that there's lots of extras kind of coming and going, and the camera is flowing through this location, and it's a brilliant show, but it's showy. I don't know. I don't remember where I started this. I'm thinking about Russian Ark now. This is like a little mini Russian Ark, I guess, and I don't know, like, does it need to be here? I guess not really, but you have to be impressed by just the technical things that go into it. I mean, you've directed stuff, I've directed stuff. We both know how hard it is to just get 2 people to talk on camera and look natural doing that. So to have something like this is pretty impressive.
It's hard not to get actors to hit 1 mark, let alone like 15 marks.
And you're not talking about thousands of people hitting multiple marks. Just reading about that, I should have watched some behind the scenes video. I'm going to do that anyway. So I guess the Steadicam operator, part of the time he was on foot, part of the time he was on a vehicle, and part of the time he was on a rickshaw. So they like literally picked him up, I guess, and carried him through part of this, amazing sort of setup that they had there. So you got to be impressed by that in some
Very
sense.
Impressive. I mean, I think though, while we're talking about this, I think the thing obviously at the time, I think that really bothered me and doesn't really bother me anymore, but I think is the thing that makes it feel like, does it really need to be here? Separate of like
the Ferris wheel.
No, not even that.
Like who is running that Ferris wheel?
Separate of the, like, in contrast, to the Pride and Prejudice ones, which I think are very much about showing you a space and teaching you about a space and characters, and it's giving you a lot of information that you need to know through its tracking shot.
Ballrooms here. They're a dance, and the camera's kind of part of the dance.
Right.
It's this choreographed movement where literally everyone is moving in a choreographed way, whereas this is, a bunch of dying and drunk and wounded people. They are not organized in any way, and that's kind of the point of it. Yeah,
but the information, right, that the tracking shot in Atonement gives you could be done in another way, not as showy, right, and probably quicker as well, obviously. And I think you would still get the same effect of it, right? The same emotional effect. You wouldn't have the same, wow, appreciation for the craft of it. But I think that's a lot of times where directors run into criticism, which is yeah, but I don't want to be thinking about how good your craftsmanship is. That's not what we're here for, right? You're here to create shots and frames and a feeling that serves the story and the feeling of the movie, not necessarily just to be look what I can do with my camera because I like doing these type of shots.
Well, and I, take this with a grain of salt, I guess, but what they said was we only had 2 days to shoot this sequence, so we decided that was the most efficient way to use those 2 days, was to just rehearse the shit out of it for a day and a half and then just try to get it, as best we can on the second day, which is what they did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think probably there's I don't know if
I would say if you're gonna light a whole scene like that, you could just have a bunch of cameras shooting not a tracking shot. That way you have to reset.
I'm just telling you what I read.
No, I know.
I'm not sure that I believe it either.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was how they justified it. Was this was the most efficient way that we could shoot this. And, it's the biggest sequence in the movie. It's the only time we really see extras in this movie. So
I would say much like Briony convincing herself that she saw James McAvoy in that scene, I think Joe Wright's convincing himself that this was the only way we could have shot this. I
don't want to psychoanalyze Joe Wright so much, but do you think there's a little bit of Briony in him? This very precocious kid whose parents ran a puppet theater and kind of grew up in this very creative, artistic world. I'll bet he wrote a play when he was 13 or something like The Trials of Arabella. I could see that.
I think for sure. I think Joe Wright, and I think we'll see this again. I haven't seen The Soloist since I came. Like most of his movies, I think I saw them once and didn't see them again until we're doing this now. I have a feeling we're going to see this in a lot of his movies, right? Even Hannah, which is a movie that I really like, right, is a very showy movie in a different way, right? It's very much you think I can only do these gorgeously mounted, sort of heartstringy, character pieces.
People punching each other. What do you think of that, bro?
Exactly. So I think that's going to be
that's the next one, right?
No, A Soloist's next, and then it's Hannah.
Okay. I'm looking forward to Hannah. I can't say I'm looking forward to The Soloist.
So, we get to talk about some interesting movie stars in The Soloist, though. Robert Downey Jr. and Jamie Foxx. So that should be an interesting discussion, I think. And his first, American movie.
Glad Jamie Foxx is okay.
Yes, me too.
Happened to that guy?
His first American movie, his first time coming over really to Hollywood and making a movie and leaving the British film industry. So that'll be interesting to discuss and how it changed his career. But I think he's a guy that with this movie, definitely got saddled with this, he likes to show off. He definitely got around his neck. And I think it stayed with him. I think it stayed with him for a long time. And I don't think it's unwarranted necessarily considering how this movie is made, right? I think he does like to show off. I think he was very much I think there are certain movies and certain things you can feel where the person making it also feels this is my shot. This is my shot to go from a director people young guy made a good movie, to this is one of the guys. This is going to be the next fill in the blank. You know what I mean? And
he's 35 when he makes Atonement, which is
very young.
Yeah. For something like that, nothing will ever, for me, surpass Paul Thomas Anderson, 27, 27 or 29, making Magnolia.
Right.
27 Boogie Nights, 29 Magnolia. Still incredible for what those movies are, lengthwise. And, Magnolia is my second favorite movie of all time. But 35 is nothing to scoff at either, right? To make a movie, as we've said, and we're going to have to use this phrase a lot, as handsomely mounted as Atonement. Yeah. And it really, in some sense...
Hey, Nick, hold on a second. Just watch out. There's a lot of mic sound happening on you right now. A lot of it feels like you're... This kind of sound. No, not right now. But it felt like you were either moving, the mic was moving or something. So just letting you know that was happening.
All right.
Yeah. So
it's better. If it's better,
fine
that's
now.
good.
It's
I'm not
fine
doing
now.
anything differently, though.
Okay.
So
I don't know. I'll tell you if it happens again. Yeah.
If I need to. All right.
Yeah. So you're saying about it being gorgeously mounted. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just to take on a production like this at that age is impressive, and particularly for what this is, right? Like it's show-offy in a certain way, but it's not show-offy in the way like 35-year-old Quentin Tarantino was show-offy.
No, well, there's very few people who are show-offy as
Robert
Quentin
Rodriguez or like a.
Well, this is show-offy in a British way.
A Greg Araki or something like that.
This is show-offy in a British way. You know what I mean? But, and I think, look, there's nothing wrong with trying to do ambitious setups and shots and concepts, right? And again, this is only his second movie. That's the other part that's like crazy about this is it's only his second movie.
I mean, he's made some very high budget and highly regarded television stuff.
Yes, but you would never. But if I was like, we're going to cover Joe Wright, he made a bunch of handsomely mounted TV productions. You'd be like, that doesn't count.
I want to write a book about Joe Wright that's just called Handsomely Mounted. Like whenever he gets to the end of his career, we'll do like a auteur theory retrospective on him, and that's what it's going to be called.
But it's like it's a different animal, right? Making a feature film for $30 million than making a TV show, right? It's just however big the TV show is,
Well, I kind of want to see Charles II now.
I mean, have at it, man. I'm sure it's available. I'm sure you can access it. I'm sure it's on BritBox.
Like I'm not watching that thing.
I'm not watching it, but I'm sure it's on BritBox or something, But
can I log into your BritBox?
I don't have BritBox.
No, I thought you might.
It's one of the few streaming services I do not.
It's one of the only ones I don't either. There's a show called Only Fools and Horses or Only Kings and Horses.
Only Fools and Horses. Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah, I've always wanted to see it, and that's the only place to watch it. And I won't pay the $10 a month to watch it. And I bet I'd really like it.
The real reason I know the name of that show is because back in like the early 2000s, or no, in the it's probably around this time, actually, the Ricky Gervais podcast like came out and it was like huge, like broke out huge. And this is like, one of the first podcasts that really went crazy big. It was like one of the first ones you had to pay, like it wasn't like a free podcast. You had to pay for it. And I was like a broke ass grad student or whatever. So I was like, I'm not paying for this. So I would download it from like, Kazaa or LimeWire or whatever the fuck, like I would torrent it and download it. But it had like these British commercials like embedded in it or whatever. Cause they had it on there when they were like, doing it for like, Radio 1, BBC or whatever they originally did it for, and they would do like a TV promo and it would be like, oh, Sundays on the BBC, Father Ted, followed by Only Fools and Horses. Like that's what it always would be. So that I heard that ad 7 bajillion times. So that like thing is stuck in my brain.
No, it was more recently for me. I think it was a Google search, like what are the greatest television comedies of all time? And it would be like Seinfeld and then that. Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You ever watched, we're in a British world. You ever watch Peep Show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Peep Show's great.
Peep Show's great.
Crowd is really
I've
great.
never watched IT Crowd. I did watch, what's something about the kids? They made a movie out of it. Not the In-Betweeners. Is it the In-Betweeners?
Yeah.
Right?
That's a thing.
Yeah, it's like teens, like it's a comedy with like teens, I think.
Not to get too far, a Mighty Boosh.
I've never watched Mighty Boosh.
Oh, Mighty Boosh is fucking great. When we sign off tonight, 15-minute episodes, I think they're 23 minutes episodes, but
so they're as long as half-hour TV shows are.
They are, yeah. Although the first time I saw the Mighty Boosh was like a 15-minute cut of a 23-minute episode. Watch it. It's definitely an acquired taste, but if you can vibe with it, I think it's great.
Like all British stuff. Daniel Mays, by the way, is the name of the actor who plays the army buddy of James McAvoy, the Chris Messina.
Okay.
And I will say...
He's the British Chris Messina.
The British Chris Messina. McAvoy starts to have these hallucinations, right? And we start to get this like... Again, which I think it really works because of, like you said, how unsure we are about what's real and what's not in this movie a lot of the time. This sort of like rewind through what happens, right? He's almost in his head like rewinding through what happens. And we get this refrain that we've been getting throughout the whole movie where we're kind of hearing these letters that him and the Keira Knightley character have been writing to each other. And hers is always like, come back to me. And his is always like, I'll return to you, with my honor intact or whatever. This whole thing where he also feels like he's trying to atone for something, right? Even though he did nothing wrong, right? He did nothing wrong. But he still feels like he has to make right his reputation, his all of this stuff.
And she gives up her status and her
Yeah.
family and everything. I mean, it is, it that makes it kind of that much more tragic. This is A Very Long Engagement, came out a couple of years before this, which is this similar kind of wartime story where these two, estranged lovers, and one of them is presumed to be dead. And it's like, how can they find each other amidst all the chaos of war? That's the
Jeannot movie, right? The Jean-Pierre Jeannot movie.
Yeah. It's my favorite.
Okay.
Because I think it's way better than Amelie, but that's just me.
Do you remember that movie? Like, took over
Amelie?
Film culture for a while.
I feel like that Amelie is the movie that you say you like if you've never seen a foreign film before. And it's like, oh, that one I can understand. And it's got like some fun stuff in it. And I saw a French, like Parasite was that for a while. Great, right? Those are great movies and people should see them.
Oh, Parasite's genius, though. Parasite's genius.
It is, but it's one of those movies where like people who've never seen a foreign film before. It's like, oh yeah, Parasite's really good. It's like, yeah, you should see some other,
yes, I know,
but
with
subtitles.
Don't be a snob.
I'm just saying, it's one of those, like if you've never seen a prestige TV show before, but you happen to watch The Wire, it's like, oh, I've seen The Wire.
Yeah, well, I mean, people who watch The Wire and talk about it all the time need to calm down. That show came out like 20 years ago. Calm down, guys.
I've never seen The Wire.
I've never seen it either. I mean, I've seen the first season, and I thought it was good. Just not my.
I'm sure it is.
It's not my. It's just I have a thing with TV. For whatever reason, like those really like intense, this feels like it's real life like type of dramas. I just can't stick with them.
I'm not a big fan of those.
If it's a movie, give me 2 hours of it and I'm in. Give me 3 hours of it and I'm in.
Yeah.
But it's like when it comes to a TV show, I kind of want to be a little bit more comforted, I guess. When I'm watching a TV show.
The Sopranos does a good job of balancing the prestige stuff with just a sense of humor and a characterization that is engaging, and you want to keep coming back to it. Yeah, it's not a slog.
And I'm sure people who watch The Wire are like, you're crazy, man. There's like so many great character moments.
I'm sure there's a lot of Michael K. Williams in that show. Great.
Michael B. Jordan's in that show. Lots of Mikes with the middle initials. Yeah. It's one of the first things he ever did.
I would have been like 10 years old.
Super young. He was like on one of the last seasons, and that's right before he did Friday Night Lights. Which he also did like near the end of the Friday Night Lights run. Yeah, he's great, and that's where I first saw him was Friday Night Lights, and I was like, who is this guy? But so we're almost at the end of Atonement though, and I want to talk about a couple of these things that happened. So one of them I really liked was we get that rewind through everything, and again I was like, this is cool. Again, it's very showy, right? It's very like work, all this stuff. But I do like that kind of like this very sad refrain, like what I mentioned with the letters. And then there's this really sweet moment, right, where he's basically circling the drain, right? Like he's hallucinating. He thinks he's somewhere else. He comes like walking out of this bar or whatever, and his friend is there, and his friend really takes care of him like this whole time. And it's very sweet, and it's very like, he doesn't like, he's been very ostentatious, let's say, the rest of the time, right? Very like, oh, you're very, very almost like a cartoon character, right? And in this one, he's so gentle with him and so understanding with him, and he like finds a place for him to lay down and kind of like tucks him in, like all of this stuff. Just very nice. Like, he wakes him up when he's been, sort of like, talking in his sleep, and the people are getting upset, and he's just kind of like,
you're upsetting the chaps. Or
the chaps are starting to get upset, and he sort of, easing it back, and he's kind of like, man, you don't look good. And he also obviously doesn't understand quite what's happening, right? He's like, I don't understand. You were fine like a couple of hours ago. I don't understand what's going on, right? And it's just very sweet and gentle, and I really liked that a lot, right? I thought that was really nice.
Never see how he gets whatever that injury is. Like, it
happens before
shrapnel or something. And it's just kind of getting worse and worse and worse. But I kind of like that choice too.
Me too.
It's just,
Me too.
He's been kind of covering it up for a long time and is trying to ignore it, and eventually succumbs to it. But we never get that scene where it's like we know something terrible is going to happen to this character.
Yeah, I mean, there's that moment too, right? When he first gets to the beach, where maybe he would ask for medical attention in a normal situation, but that officer says almost immediately, "It's a good thing you're not injured. They told me to leave the injured people behind."
Yeah,
so obviously he's not going to say anything then. Like he doesn't want to get left behind, right? But the movie also plays this little magic trick, right, where we've got a couple of things where it's like one of the letters that Keira Knightley's character is sending to him mentions that Briony wants to come see her, and she's not sure yet. And then the last thing that his friend says to Robbie is, we're going home at 7:00, in the morning or whatever. Right. And the next thing we get really is Briony going to see her sister.
And he's there.
Right. And, there's like, I like the way the scene is played at the beginning, because at the beginning, it sort of almost plays it like it might not be him. You know, it's kind of hiding it from you a little bit, being like
very quick, he gets up from the bed and disappears,
Yeah.
and you think it's another one of those scenes where it's like it looks like him, but it's not him.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, much
Exactly.
Like the assault scene.
And then he comes in and we have, you know, this big scene between the three of them, right, where he's very angry, obviously, and he gets to like dress her down again.
Yeah, this confrontation and resolution that you've wanted. You know, it's one of those expectation things where we're waiting for a scene like that. We want him to come back so he can kind of give her what for. And, and we get that, but we don't really get, you know, it's almost like what she says at the end, right? Like she wanted to give them a happy ending, and the movie wanted to give us this final confrontation between those two characters, and we get it, but it's bittersweet because it's kind of not real. Well,
right.
It is not real.
And it's seeded through the movie in some interesting ways too, right? Where she's talking to that French soldier. He asks, like, did your sister ever end up with that man that she loved so much? And she says yes at that moment. And she sees the kind of relief that it gives him, right? Like this, like, and you see it sort of seeding it there. And I also think the movie's smart because that flashback scene where Briony like jumps in the lake, right? And Robbie saves her. When he saves her, he's so angry, right?
Yeah.
Because he knows she did it on purpose. And he's like, and that's the one really where he sees like really like who she is, right? What she's willing to do to sort of like get her way or whatever. And the level of anger he has in that scene is sort of matched in this scene we see, this fake scene that we see that she's sort of inventing. And I don't think you'd really believe his reaction necessarily unless you got that earlier scene, because you never see him kind of reach that level of anger at any other point, right, in this story. So I think the movie is very smart in those ways of sort of building these scenes and earning these moments and making these moments believable, even though I do also think Wright is shooting this in a way to make you feel like something's off about the way this is working out. You know what I mean? Like McAvoy is shot very weirdly at the beginning, almost like she's hesitating about like, should I even write that he's here right now? Or am I just coming to talk to my sister, right? Like, you know, maybe my first idea was there was another man here. Maybe she had moved on.
What is Keira Knightley's character? She seems like he's such a deep sleeper.
He sleeps so deeply.
Yeah, and we just see him kind of wake up and like just disappear. Like he lines out of the bedroom, and we're kind of and it really, you know, I thought it was me. I was like, did I miss something here? Like, was that a different guy?
Yeah.
You know, was she just sleeping with somebody else, waiting for him to come back, which it could have been. And then, you know, he actually becomes part of the scene, which is pretty interesting. But it's the movie kind of makes you wait for that a little bit. It delays the gratification of actually seeing him in the scene.
And this is probably the other actress's best scene, right? When she's in this sort of throuple with the three of them, sort of
Romola Garai.
Like
I love that name.
But again, it's one thing where you're like, because it's so close in age, you're like, this should be the other actress. Like you just have that feeling, you know, because she's really trying.
She almost seems like she's older than Keira Knightley.
Yes, exactly. You know, so all this stuff works like that, you know, but again, it leads to the unreality of the scene in some ways as well. I think the scene really works. The scene is meant to be fully unreal. He
still talks to her like she is younger than she is, right? Yes. Like he's addressing her as like a 13-year-old, you know, kind of admonishing her in a way that I don't think you would do with someone that is an adult like you are.
No, and again,
yeah, and I do think it kind of plays to what we were talking about.
Yeah, the unreality of the scene.
It's the way she would have seen it.
You know, and it almost feels also like her kind of being like, you know, the character in the scene running through these like ideas of how she can help and them shooting them down. It almost feels like the person herself trying to come up with a way to make it right and not being able to figure out a way to make it right.
Well, she can't testify against her now husband.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you get that revelation. I don't remember which scene it's in where you actually see the scene for real, the assault scene, and she sees Benedict Cumberbatch's actual face.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too where you're like, man, like you really are terrible. Like you saw him and you knew it the whole time, you know? And the fact that like you let all of this happen for all of these years, you know, is just crazy. And they said they're in the scene, like, why did you wait this long? Like you could have gone at any point, you know, and said something. And now you come when it's too late, and it's very too late at that point, right? Everything is done at that point. Like she's married, that guy will never get in trouble for what he did. These two people are actually dead. It's like this, you know, this sort of devastating sort of revelation at the very end. But yeah, we get to see it's good. It's all, you know, we get to see like them dancing in the window. It's almost like very like end of Avengers Endgame where you see Captain America and Peggy dancing or whatever. You know, the next thing we get is right the modern day scenes, right, with Vanessa Redgrave. And I mean,
I love the cut there. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's the biggest time. Like there's a lot of time jumps in this movie.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we're going back a few minutes. This time we're going so far into the future, and it looks different and it feels different. We're in a television studio, and before we were in a world that, you know, doesn't even have television yet.
Right.
And you know, it's the character. She looks so much, as I was saying before, that's the same mole, it's the same facial expressions, but she's so much older. I mean, this is a person at the end of her life, and literally, you know, this movie has resolved around young people the entire time, and now we finally see a very, very old person. You know, looking back on everything that we've seen before, it is, you know, it's pretty shocking of a time cut. And I think really, you know, it's this very starkly lit, you know, she's got these television-ish lights on her. You know, it's real contrast from that prestige pick look that we see leading up to that point.
And she's basically like just looking down the barrel of the lens, basically. She's looking a little off, but it's basically she's just talking to you at that point, right? And most of this, other than the cutaways when she's started describing certain scenes, is just her face. It's basically just a monologue. You know, Vanessa Redgrave comes in and just like, you know, shatters the backboard with a monologue. Like,
got away with a close-up, that Joe Wright. I mean, you know, he's known for like these tracking shots, but also, you know, when he gets up in an actor's face, he knows what he's doing there.
Yeah. And, you know, when I remember watching it in 2007, it sort of feels the same way to me now, where there's so little time spent in this era, right? It almost feels a little bit like a tacked on like epilogue in some ways because of how short it is. Obviously, it's insanely important to the story and the resolution, but. And again,
I love that. I don't want more. It absolutely is an epilogue. It's a coda, you know, it's this many years. And if you're like, I think it's a very hard thing to do, but I think this movie really pulls it off really nicely. Like it does. It's very, I guess the book works this way too, where you get this time, it's just the last 10 minutes of the movie or so. Here's the most famous actress in this movie. You know, one of the sort of all-time legends that we know is going to be in it. We haven't seen her yet. And, you know, she kind of gets this wonderful monologue at the end, and it really does feel like that sort of devastating last chapter. Do you read David Mitchell?
No.
Cloud Atlas, that guy?
I've never read Cloud Atlas, no.
Cloud Atlas is one of the greatest books ever written. He has a later book that does a sort of final chapter that's very much like this. And, you know, we've been kind of following these characters through a lot of it. And then there's a time jump, and the last chapter, it's like the world is ending. It's like this very kind of understated apocalypse, but we kind of, you know, there's this creeping dread about it. And this kind of reminded me a little bit of that. And it's one chapter in a very long and sort of expansive book, much like everything he writes is. And I like that. Now, I think it's a ballsy move, but particularly, you know, when a story is this good, it hits hard, I think, because you're 9. And I didn't remember that at all. That was one of the things that was really interesting.
Oh, really?
Coming back to this. Yeah, I forgot there was that time jump so far in the future. Like I said, you know, you got me again, movie. Good on you. It was.
I definitely knew that there was a time jump. I remember there being some sort of like, and now you're old, and now you're going to talk about something that happened. You know, much like I remembered like something about the story about, you know, Robbie, and C isn't real. Like I didn't remember the exact details, but I remember that stuff.
Yeah, I remember that, you know, it was a false accusation and not
that part. I remember there was some sort of reuniting that wasn't real. Cause I definitely remember that.
I didn't remember that either.
But I'm actually very curious about how much of the book is this, like how much of the book takes place in this time period. I would be curious to find that out. But no, I think Vanessa Redgrave does a great job. And again, I think the story does a really interesting thing where you're kind of like, yeah, I feel bad for you, like we said at the beginning, but everything you're saying to me sounds kind of self-serving. Like you just like, yeah, she was a nurse for a couple of years to pay her penance, but then what? She was just a famous rich writer for the rest of her life.
This is her 21st book.
Yeah.
I finally finished this story. All the other stuff was just fluff that I sold. You know, it was on the bestseller list and everything. But now I can finally tell my story because I'm dying now.
Yeah.
And I don't really need the money anymore.
Yeah. It wasn't, you know, so like, I don't think that's a flaw of the movie. I think it makes the movie more interesting.
I think that's that character.
Yeah.
I think it's very true to who Briony is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you know that was Anthony Minghella?
I didn't know it until I saw it in your thing.
I didn't either.
This has got to be pretty close to when he died, right? He didn't die much after this, did he?
I didn't realize. Yeah, he died pretty young.
He died very young.
Long of this, because this movie was compared by a lot of critics to The English Patient.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Never seen.
Me neither.
and I'd probably like it very much. It feels like a very Atonement-like movie, and I really like Atonement.
Yeah, he died a year later. He died in 2008.
Wow.
I knew it was very close to when he died. His son, very talented, by the way.
Max
Minnella. Yeah.
Are they? I didn't know they were related.
I'm pretty sure it's his son.
The same name.
I'm pretty sure it's his son. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm going to look right now because maybe I'm crazy. I thought it was his son.
I'll buy it.
Yeah, he's the son of Anthony Minghella. Yeah, so that's Minghella. Yeah, that's
like. Should we? Is Anthony Minghella someone we need to do on this show?
We could do Anthony Minghella. I've never seen. The only movie I think of his I've seen is The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah, and I've seen Captain Corelli's Mandolin. That was him.
Oh boy, that was him.
Yeah, that's a prestige pick. Nick Cage there. Let's do.
No, it's not. No, he didn't do Captain Corelli's Mandolin.
I swear he did.
No, his filmography is his first movie is in 1978, a movie I've never heard of called A Little Like Drowning. He doesn't do the make that movie until 1990, and it's called obviously Truly Madly Deeply. The 1993 Mr. Wonderful, 1996 The English Patient, 1999 The Talented Mr. Ripley, 2003 Cold Mountain, 2006 Breaking and Entering. And that's 2006 was his last movie. And then he was supposed to direct 9, but he died before he could make the movie. And then Rob Marshall took over.
9 is a guilty pleasure for me.
Oh, man. Very guilty because 9's a terrible movie.
I disagree.
Oh, my God, dude. Seriously?
I like it, yeah. I got that Blu-ray.
Oh, my God. That's such a terrible movie. Somehow they made it's John Madden directed Captain Corelli's Mandolin, by the way.
That wasn't far off.
No. Not far off at all. In fact, if you said Joe Wright directed Captain Corelli's Mandolin, I'd be like, yeah, maybe. A little early for him, but yeah, maybe. So, yeah, no. They're definitely not. They're definitely all of the same sort of like group of people, right? Anyway, I can't believe you like 9, dude. That's crazy.
Well, when we get to Rob Marshall.
No, we're never doing Rob Marshall. I will never do Rob Marshall. He's made exactly one good movie.
You're the musicals guy.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Wouldn't you? If anybody was going to defend him.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
No, Chicago's fantastic. I think Chicago's great.
Chicago's really good, yeah.
And that's the only good movie he ever made.
I'm struggling to remember because I'm not a musicals guy. I just remember really liking 9. Again, I'm a sucker for movies about making movies. So
me too. I'd watch 8.5 any day.
Sure.
9 is a terrible movie. Somehow Rob Marshall made Daniel Day-Lewis uninteresting in a movie.
So you say.
So Chicago, love it. Memoirs of a Geisha, no. Boring, bad.
That
exists. 9, in my opinion, bad. Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, one of the most interminable movies I've ever watched.
Oh, I didn't know he did a Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, well, he's kind of like the Disney guy. Basically, that's what he's become, basically. Into the Woods, terrible. A great musical turned into a terrible movie. Mary Poppins Returns.
Fair. I'll take your word.
Mary Poppins Returns. No, thank you.
Didn't know that existed. Okay.
Really? Emily Blunt? She played Emily Blunt plays Mary Poppins.
Oh, right, yeah.
Songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Hugely disappointing movie. And then he made the Little Mermaid live action movie that came out 2 years ago, I think, 2023.
Yeah, I didn't like that very much.
It's not very good, but I'll say one thing. It's better than most of his other movies, so that's crazy. 2, it's better than most of those live action remakes are, to be totally honest with you.
I think the only one I've seen is Lady and the Tramp, which wasn't really very live action anyway.
No, that's a Disney Plus only joint as well.
Yeah, it was basically a direct-to-DVD thing.
One of these weird things where like, we have like a perfect hour and 20-minute long movie. What if we make it a boring 2.5 hour long movie? Joe Wright hasn't done one of those, thankfully. Though I feel like he is like...
I think he's on the... Yeah.
He could definitely be primed.
He's on the short list.
Yeah, yep. For sure. He's definitely the right level. Like, this guy's really talented, but doesn't seem to get a lot of work anymore.
Were you as heartbroken as when Barry Jenkins signed on to Mufasa?
What a waste of talent, man. What a waste of talent.
I mean, like I hope that was, I'm sure it was. Like, that paycheck must have been massive, but are you sure, Moonlight director Barry Jenkins? Like, you are better than this. You know that, right?
Here's what I'll say. If it gives him the chance to make something else that he really wants to make, it's worth it, right? You make that movie and that allows you to make something else that...
I mean, I feel like Moonlight would have given him the chance to make whatever he wanted.
But a big studio... But if he wants to make something that costs a lot of money... There's lots of studios won't give those movies to people unless they prove that they can make something really big, like bigly, like a lot of moving parts kind of thing,
Well, I think even worse was I read somewhere that it took 4 years to make it. So that's 4 years when he could have been doing something that wasn't Mufasa.
He's one of the, like, somebody like Rob Marshall makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
can handle a big movie. Apparently is a super nice guy who like is really good with people and kids and all this kind of stuff. Makes total sense, right? Like Favreau, like technology, hound who just like loves doing
Favreau's
stuff.
He's the one who kind of kicked this thing off. So
yes, he did. You're talking about the Jungle Book, right? The Jungle Book was the first big one. Yeah, absolutely. But that wasn't the first live action remake. They did Cinderella before that.
No, I guess Favreau is the one that did the CGI animals.
He did. Yes, he did. He did that first. But those are the guys. But Joe Wright fits like right into that group of people,
especially like 2025 Joe Wright.
Yeah, where it's like, Joe, you haven't really been making a lot of impact. You want to come direct? I don't know, like Frozen, live action Frozen or whatever. Whatever the hell it's gonna be. That's definitely got that written all over it, right? But anyway, we're not there yet. We're right at the start of Mr. Wright's career. Next time we're gonna be talking about The Soloist, which is, like I said, his first American movie. Robert Downey Jr., Jamie Foxx, once again was supposed to be, much like this movie, early was like, this is going to be an Oscar movie. Downey, in the middle of his, it's the very beginning of his comeback.
Downey Renaissance, yeah.
Yeah, this is like...
Jamie Foxx coming off of Ray a couple of years earlier.
Yeah,
that had some real things going for it.
Yeah, The Soloist comes out a year after Iron Man. It's like, Downey is like full tilt, the guy, basically. And Jamie Foxx, like we said, Oscar winner, has been in a bunch of big movies. So it's this is it. We're primed to go. We've got a director who's on
Ray and Stealth the same year, yeah. Coming off the 1-2 punch of Ray and Stealth.
Yeah. But I mean, I really think it's the Ray thing, probably, right?
It was Stealth that he won the Oscar for.
Yeah, definitely. Though Stealth, I will say, it's not as bad as people remember it.
I have never seen it. I probably never will see it. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
It's a better movie than 9, in your opinion?
I mean, less disappointing than 9, because I didn't expect anything from Stealth. But we'll never talk about that movie because we'll never do a Rob Marshall. But we'll mention it when we do in 10 years, when we do our Federico Fellini miniseries.
Okay. No, I feel like that's the worst time to talk about 9, but all right.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That's what I'll be ready to go. It's a great musical too. That's the other thing. It's a great musical. That's the part too. That's really disappointing about that movie. Anyway. So yeah, we're going to talk about The Soloist next week, and then we've got Hannah on the deck after that, and then we're kind of in uncharted territory for me.
Tell you, so I like the one that I'm really looking forward to, and I might have mentioned this before, is I was reading a little bit about his Anna Karenina and what he actually did with it. That sounds like the real outlier, the real departure in the Joe Wright filmography, the one that's like, here is something that I am doing that nobody else would even think to do. Do you know anything about that movie?
I don't know anything other than Tom Stoppard wrote it.
So it's Tom Stoppard, and it's like the whole thing is done like as a theatrical production. So it's
interesting.
They compared it to like Lars Ventura's Dogville, that kind of thing, where it's its artifice is kind of part of what it is.
That's fascinating for him to do, because that's what we're talking about. Atonement is
Yeah, like this is, trying to sort of hide that it's doing that, and that's like right in your face. Like, no, this is a stage play, kind of thing.
So that should be interesting.
Theatrical. Yeah, like I wasn't super excited to see that movie, but just the thought of it being that. Plus, it's Keira Knightley again.
It is Keira Knightley again. Yeah, yes. I think it's Jude Law is in there.
Yep, with an actress that he really works well with.
Yes,
so I'm kind of pumped for that one now.
I'm also, there are things I'm interested in. Anna Karenina, now I'm very interested in watching that because I like that idea of that. Darkest Hour, kind of interested to see.
See, that one feels very much like the Oscar bait, I
actually hear that it's not as much like that as you'd expect. That's what I thought as well, which is why I never saw it. I was like, well, this is just one of those movies that they want Gary Oldman to get an Oscar, so they're just like, you can play Winston Churchill.
Exactly. It feels like it's just like custom built for for Oscar exposure. And I watched the Oscars that year. I saw the clips from it. It's like, I know what this is. I'm not that interested.
Yeah.
But I do love Gary Oldman.
Yeah. So apparently, but it's not totally that.
Although the Gary Oldman I love is the True Romance, the professional Gary Oldman. So I don't think we'll be getting that.
No, I mean, that's a long time ago. You're getting more of the Slow Horses Gary Oldman at this point, where he's just like farting and yelling. That's kind of what he does. Slow Horses is genius, by the way. But I'll talk about that more when we talk about when we're on the Darkest Hour episode.
Yeah, I'm going to watch that. You recommended that to me, and I'm interested. I've attempted. I've had the Apple TV. I've had the highlight over it a few times. No, I can't start this now, but I will.
So yeah, and then I'm interested in Cyrano. I'm interested to see what it is with old Dinklage in it. So
that's the one I keep forgetting even exists.
Yeah, that's his most recent one.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Again, this is the first time we're really into a director where we're in completely uncharted territory for the second half of their career for me. Most of the time it's like a smattering. It's like seeing a couple of their early things or one of their early things.
Hannah's the last one I saw?
Yeah, Hannah's the last one I saw too.
Okay.
So I saw everything up to Hannah, and I loved Hannah. So it's weird that I didn't see Anna Karenina because about the next year. It's just one of those things where for some reason I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm out on Joe Wright.
I was just like intimidated by it. I'm like, I've never read that book, so I'll probably get nothing out of that.
We're doing a lot of classic literature adaptations with Mr. Wright. So we haven't really done that yet. A lot more modern adaptations we've done in some of the other miniseries. So it's fun to do that. So yeah, we'll keep going on this. Right now the tournament is running. I don't know where we're at with it when we're recording, when this is out, but some interesting developments have been happening. Some people have been winning, which I wasn't expecting. So
some that I'm very excited to potentially be talking about.
Me too.
Many of my choices seem to be doing pretty well, so we should have put some money down because have we talked about? We kind of both did like half of the list.
We haven't talked about it. No, not really. No, we kind of both picked 8 directors.
We haven't like taken credit. Like, no one will ever know which are Nick movies and which are Bobby movies. We should have placed a little gentleman's wager on it. And
again, by this time when this is coming out, it's going to be long over. But my prediction is it's either going to be at this point, and people can be like, you were so wrong when they listen to this, is it's either going to be Peter Jackson or Denis Villeneuve. That is my guess. Denis Villeneuve we haven't even had the Denis Villeneuve matchup yet for the first round, so he could end up losing. That's when, if to timestamp this when we're recording it, so he could end up losing for sure. But that's my guess.
I love that guy. So I don't know if I can do Incendies again.
Well, if it comes up, my friend.
This movie's great, but oh boy.
Can I ask
Cronenberg, maybe in there?
Cronenberg, it's possible. I mean, he did win he upset in his matchup.
Yeah, I think Cronenberg's got a shot.
Yeah, for sure. Catherine Bigelow upset Quentin Tarantino, which I was very surprised about.
We'll probably get to Catherine Bigelow at some point anyway. So
we might, but we'll get to her sooner if she wins. If she wins this,
right? But she's not going anywhere.
No, she's not going anywhere for sure. Let me ask you guys: since it's long gone and this can't put the thumb on any scales, right? Who are you hoping wins at this point?
Maybe Cronenberg.
Interesting.
Just because, it's a very lengthy filmography.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff that I haven't seen that I think is really interesting. And there's a lot of stuff I have seen that I think a lot of people haven't. And I just, and there's some movies of his that I genuinely love and think are just, top tier, outstanding. So I think it'll, you can't have a boring conversation about David Cronenberg. Definitely
not. I think it would be very good for conversations for sure. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what people are voting for, but I know he has, I did a John Carpenter podcast for 3 years. And Cronenberg has a similar kind of rabid cult fan base that really, there are Facebook groups dedicated to just David Cronenberg movies. So I think he'd be really interesting to talk about.
The two people that I was kind of most...
Plus a lot of his movies are short. So
there you go.
I think Rabid is 77 minutes, so we can bang through those pretty quickly. And I've never seen Rabid.
Never seen Rabbit. I've never seen a lot of his movies, to be totally honest with you, but it would give us a chance to really, again, one of those guys who we'd never done this before, right? Which is a very long career that spans a lot of different eras and ups and downs, as far as his popularity goes. And that resurgence he sort of had in the movies that we were talking about earlier in this podcast, the history of violence, era.
Eastern Promises
era. The Viggo Mortensen era of his career.
Sure. Yep.
I think it would be kind of interesting. And then he's continuing to make movies that not a lot of people, not the general public talk about, but are movies that are very well received and stuff like that. Still works with very interesting actors.
I've been meaning to see The Shrouds forever now. So that'll give me a good excuse to watch that.
Keira, what's that Adam Driver movie? What is it called? Oh my God, what's that Adam Driver movie called that he did?
Oh, it's an adaptation of High Rise? No, that's Ben Wheatley.
No. It's, oh my God. You think if I just searched Adam Driver,
David Cronenberg,
I can find it, but I'm not finding it. It's like a name, isn't it? Isn't it a name? Oh my God.
Are you thinking of Patterson, the Jim Jarmusch Adam Driver movie?
No. I'm not thinking of the Jim Jarmusch movie, but maybe I'm wrong.
Anyway, you were saying who are you looking forward to?
They're both going to lose
talking
today. They're both going to lose. Wong Kar-wai and Bong Joon-ho were the people I was kind of the most fascinated to
Bong
talk about.
Joon-ho would have been great too. Yeah,
but they're going to lose today.
One of them. Yeah,
they're going to lose today. To interesting directors. They're losing interesting directors. They're going to lose to Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso Cuarón. So they're both guys I would also love to talk about. But any of these directors winning would be really great. I'm honestly kind of relieved that Tarantino lost. Not that it wouldn't have been a fun miniseries.
I'm not surprised. I feel, again, we were talking about like just kicking names around when we started talking about the show, and it's like, I love Tarantino. I will, for all the things that you can criticize about his work, it's really important in my life and really kind of got me into movies in a lot of ways, and I'd love to talk about him, but like, he's done so much talking about himself, and they're like, to do a podcast about a guy who has a movie podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
Again, it's
a great podcast.
I'm relieved because, there's just a lot of, if there was just like one foundational text, it would be one thing, but there's like four, so it's really tough to talk about those kind of things.
Part of what I enjoy about the show is like I am seeing movies that I have not seen and would not be seeing. Like I own all the Tarantino movies, like there's not that many of them. I love them all, and I've extensively seen all of them, and it's like maybe I have exhausted all that I have to say about them, and I can just kind of appreciate them for what they are. Whereas as Joe Wright's Cyrano is like, I wasn't seeing that any other way, and now having seen all of his other movies leading up to that, maybe I'll have an interesting take on it. I don't know if I've had an interesting take on anything, but I feel like there's more likelihood of that than me saying anything that anyone would give a shit about like Pulp Fiction.
Right. And the problem with Tarantino, right, is that everything, because he has so few movies or because he makes such a big deal about all his movies, there is no movie where you're like, oh, this is an underseen gem that no one's seen. It's just like,
and he's a celebrity in ways that,
and it's
like, oh, hey, did you know he has a foot fetish?
Yeah, and a divisive one at that. So that would also be part of it.
Like we could spend an entire series just picking out all the foot shots in his movies. I don't really want to do that.
Neither. Me either.
They're there. For those
they are there. It's not like even someone like Jackson, obviously, who has like huge movies I've been talking about a ton, but he has all these little weird movies.
Meet the Feebles. I would love to talk about Meet the Feebles. It's not good, but it's a lot of fun.
He has weird little movies. He also has like,
some big budget bombs.
Exactly. Like Lovely Bones. And talking about King Kong, I think would be really interesting because it's a movie that I think would be really fascinating to talk about. What happens when a director has been thinking about making a movie for 30 years and gets to make that movie without any restrictions on them? Has it ever actually turned out good? You know what I mean? So, like, not that I think King Kong is like a disaster. I don't think it's a disaster, but I like it as well. But it's a fascinating project to talk about, right? So those kind of directors I think are interesting. So I'm saying I'm happy that Tarantino lost, even though I do love him and I count him as one of, the most influential directors in my life. It's more interesting to talk about those other people. Cronenberg would be fascinating to talk about, and if he has won by this point, I will be excited to talk about his movies. So that'll be cool. And I also think I think someone like Cuarón would be fun as well. There's a lot of people. Again, like I said on here, everyone on here, anybody who wins, I'm not going to be upset about it.
No, right? I think they were all, Miyazaki got destroyed pretty early on.
Destroyed by Cronenberg.
There's a lot of movies that I'd like to see of his that I haven't seen. And I've liked the ones that I've seen.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. It also, like, I guess it's a little bit of research, a little bit of marketing thing that we're doing here. Like, who are the people that we're definitely never going to talk about on the show? And I kind of feel like Tarantino might be one of those people now. Like, now the people have spoken, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Whoever gets 0 votes, it's like, all right, we'll save that for something, another project or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's also a good test for us too, when we're looking at these directors and making these lists, it's like, okay, would we ever want to cover this person regardless of what happens? Like, is this person fit enough into our sort of like rubric to fit in here, right? Which is like, do they have even a section of their career that is fascinating to talk about, that's underseen, that really informs stuff that people maybe don't think about, right? Like, there are certain directors, like, we're never going to talk about Peter Jackson unless he wins a bracket. He's just too big of a director. People have talked about him too much, right? But Cronenberg's a person that we could maybe talk about even if he doesn't win a bracket, right? He someone that kind of gets put on our, like, oh, maybe we should talk about this person sort of, section of people, right? Because he does have a very wide-ranging career that It goes into a lot of genres and a lot of moods and tones and all this kind of stuff.
And I feel like he probably has another history of violence sort of period. You know, he hasn't been doing that for a while, but like he could come back with a big movie at some point, and that might be the time where we could do something kind of leading up to that.
Right. Absolutely. So, it's some interesting stuff to talk about. It's fun to think about movies and think about, directors and think about this stuff, and fun that people are voting on it too. So that's cool. That's very cool. All right. So we're going to get out of here. Next time, like I said, is The Soloist. But until then, thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you to everybody who's been listening. Until next time, be good to one another. Later.